funds that will be used to help with the Yapoa Terrace rehabilitation, which is about 230 plus units of affordable housing in the core of the downtown area that is a Section 40 HUD development. So if it doesn't get rehabilitated, that program no longer exists. But if it does get rehabilitated, they've got that program for another 40 years, which allows low-income seniors to live in Yapoa Terrace and not be rent burdened, because their rent is 30% of their income. So it's whatever their income is, their rent is 30% of it. So if they had no income, they would pay no rent. And the fact that we've got 230 plus units on that small of a footprint in our downtown core would never be able to be replaced if it were to go away. So we're
Great.
looking forward to that.
Thank you for that update. And then Commissioner Nicolello.
So an update on the public participation committee. Staff is going to be coming to you on May 6th with a little bit of information about some of the work that we've been doing. They're going to come and jointly present to you. It's going to be Eric Brown and I believe somebody from HR&I. They're going to talk to you about some of the work that the city's been doing on public participation guidelines, and also some of the discussion that our committee has been having about how to best implement those guidelines into the work that we do as a planning commission. And these are guidelines that the city manager's office, I believe, had worked on, so that's why they're just filtering down to us now. So should be a good discussion, and that's going to be May 6th.
Perfect. Thank you.
That's actually the 8th.
Yeah, just a correction. That would be Monday, May 8th. Yep.
Monday, May 8th.
Thank you, staff.
Okay. So a couple of other items. Commissioner Nicolello needs to leave today at 1 o'clock. So she'll slip out at 1. We still have a quorum then. If we don't finish up, which likely we won't because there'll be some follow-up items after today's deliberations, we'll have a special meeting tomorrow evening starting at 5. And there's a possibility, if we don't have a quorum, I will be here. But if we have a quorum, I have a conflict, so I won't be here. So I'll be flexible to make sure we have a quorum. Other items from staff?
Yeah, I'd just like to mention briefly that, let's see, Parks and Rec System Plan Update, I believe, is coming up. That would be this evening, April 24th at the 5:30 work session in Harris Hall. For those of you who are paying attention and interested in the Parks and Rec Plan Update, so you already actually went over a couple of items that are coming up for you, so I'll skip that. Speaking about recruitment for Planning Commission, I had mentioned that there were there was a very rich pool of applicants for all the city's boards and commissions this year. There were a total of 155 people applying to 24 openings at the city's boards and commissions. So that's a huge turnout. It's about double what we have seen in the past. So because of that, there are some updated procedures that the council is putting in place to help them make it through all the different interviews or the process for selection. So I'll just throw a couple of these out here for you all so you kind of have a sense for what's going on. First, council will be selecting a number of candidates to advance to the next level of decision for each position, and what they're doing is selecting select the number of applicants they'd like to interview based on the number of openings on the board or commission multiplied by a factor of 3. So if you have 1 opening, there would be 3 people advanced. If you have 3 openings, there would be 9 people advanced, etc. So second, council will conduct interviews during a regular meeting time to ensure maximum attendance, and interviews will take place in Harris Hall on May 15th from 5:30 to 7:15, and on May 17th from 12 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. So basically the Monday and the Wednesday work session beginning on May 15th. And instead of conducting the 15-minute interviews, which I think all of you went through when you were appointed to the commission, They will be, the council has asked that interviewees come prepared with a 3-minute statement on why they're interested and qualified for the board or commission they've applied for. So it will be more of a brief presentation from each of the applicants. A little different format, well, quite a bit of a different format than what we've had in the past. So I just wanted to make you all aware of that, and that'll be part of a public meeting that people can watch and kind of see how that plays out. So a little bit different. Okay,
Okay, great.
that's all I have.
You want to mention the South Willamette?
Oh, yeah, thank you. Good heavens, yes, of course. Council met on Wednesday of last week. Councilor Evans put forward a motion, and essentially the motion was to, you can go online and look at it so you can hear it from the actual wording if you like, but essentially to redirect at least planning staff's time to support River Road Santa Clara and the area planning work and the corridor planning work that's happening up there, and also to can look at some planning work for the Bethel area, particularly around corridor redevelopment. And then Councilor Zelenka during the discussion also added a friendly amendment to include the direction that council already gave to staff back in March, or June, I should say, of 2012, to also pursue area planning in the university area neighborhoods. And so River Road Santa Clara and the university area neighborhoods were two of the neighborhoods that were actually mentioned in the 2012 Envision Eugene recommendations. So they postponed a vote on that decision until tonight after the public forum. So I don't have any results as to what will actually come out of that, but just wanted to update you.
Perfect. Any other questions, comments? Okay. So there are a couple of other people that have arrived. So we have a last item that we usually ask anybody from the public, just how is Planning Commission doing? If anybody's interested in contributing, how are we doing? Any feedback, thoughts? No, it looks like public's going to pass at this time, so we'll move to agenda item number 3. We have a work session today. The third part of our deliberations for the Envision Eugene Urban Growth Boundary proposal. And today we're going to, per my email and the AIS, we're going to try to focus the first hour on the Clear Lake Overlay Zone, and then the remaining 2 hours on deliberating the remaining portion of this package. And I think that is all, with the exception of, obviously, the special meeting would be held tomorrow if, assuming we don't finish deliberations today. And it's likely we'll have follow-up items, so, but we'll review that at the end of the meeting. So, staff.
Great, thank you. So what we did to prepare for today was take all of your questions during our first meeting on the Clear Lake Overlay Zone and turn them into a memo. So that went out to you at the end of last week. There's a number of items that you brought up, and we attempted to provide you a way to address the issue. And so that's how the memo is formatted, giving you our recommendation. Then if there were other ways to address a particular issue, we called those out as well. The other thing that we are doing is I brought Zach to the table to directly tell you a little bit more about the background and development of the Clear Lake Overlay Zone language, because he was the staff person who managed it. And so I'm going to let him give you a little bit of background as an introduction into your deliberations on that issue.
Thanks, Terry. Yeah, as Terry said, we thought it would be helpful, based on some of the questions and the discussion that we heard last week, to just go into the origins of the work product and some of the decision making that subcommittee made, acting on the direction of City Council. So we were in this, we had this challenging position to recognize the environmental justice directive that council gave us, and at the same time recognize that this is an economic development venture as we explore urban growth boundary expansion. But at the same time, the balancing act, when kind of push came to shove with that subcommittee was to be deferential to the environmental justice concerns in the Bethel community. We also needed to recognize the limitations of a land use code and that there are cooperative agencies elsewhere in the state and the region like LRAPA, DEQ that take on other responsibilities beyond just zoning and development standards. So again, those were kind of questions that I think were alluded to in the discussion, so we just wanted to make those clear. As we, before diving in today with deliberations. So the roles and responsibilities that you see baked into the overlay are important to call out, because I think we were kind of revisiting some of the questions around emissions and who regulates that and that sort of thing. So, you know, our planning division and our BPS division would be the ones, you know, tasked with not only land division, but also development standards in the land use code. But this overlay zone also brings LRAPA to the table, and that was done intentionally in cooperation with them and in several meetings with their staff to understand what tools would make a cooperative arrangement with that agency better. This is something that we do with DSL, so the Division of State Lands, when dealing with wetlands. So it's not dissimilar to that process where we essentially require some sort of referral between our interagency partners. So that's where that pre-clearance letter concept was developed. It's essentially just a communication vehicle to make sure that any new major development in this area is well aware of their responsibilities with LRAPA, as well as our land use regulatory responsibilities. And then lastly, the code enforcement division or group within our BPS division, our building and permit services division, is really the group tasked with enforcing and monitoring those performance standards. So I know that got a lot of attention in our last deliberation session. So that's not so much our planning or our land use techs that get involved. That's really those performance standards basically empower our code enforcement staff down the road and also supplement the enforcement staff that LRAPA has at their disposal, which covers all of Lane County, and you know, so it brings a little more to the table for the Bethel neighborhood. Because the issue of the glass manufacturing was brought up, we also wanted to just point out the research that was done into the development of the overlay zone. So we did local research to understand who, not only in the EOA, who our local or our likely developers will be in this area, but to also understand kind of what the realities are on the ground whenever we're looking at our Toxics Right to Know program, as well as our LRAPA staff and kind of history of permitting, history of citations and that sort of thing, and just realistic discharges that take place in the course of development, manufacturing, and that sort of thing. So we did all that local research, but we also, to understand what the development realities were, and then we also looked further afield to California, namely, when looking at best practices in land use and other forms of regulation to ensure basically that these future developments are good neighbors to the Bethel community, to the park, to the future school that you're contemplating now in the deliberations. So admittedly, the glass manufacturing infractions were just kind of outright illegal discharges that everybody's read about in the newspaper. So to the extent that we did all of our research around local issues, we didn't see those. We saw more along the lines of just kind of emissions that were not pleasant to live next to, but were in accordance with DEQ's regulatory thresholds. So that's where you see prohibitions and the separation requirements that are now included in the Clear Lake Overlay Zone. The 1,000 feet, if that was a point of, I think that was, somebody asked where that 1,000 feet came from. That was a best practice identified through the California air quality agencies, which they have similar regional structures throughout the state of California, just like LRAPA is the sole regional regulatory agency in Oregon. And I guess the last point I'll make was there was a question raised about the heritage industries, or mainly around lumber, wood products, and I think there was acknowledgement within our subcommittee as we were crafting the code that yes, a newly established wood or lumber manufacturer of some sort would probably have to meet a higher level of scrutiny, a higher regulatory bar than what has been in the past. But with council's directive to staff to prioritize environmental justice concerns, when there was some sort of disagreement on that subcommittee, I think we steered or we favored the environmental justice concern over, or just took that directive to heart. So that's why you see the reconstituted wood products being included in the prohibited or the separation area. So that's the origin. That's a little bit of our thinking, and I know Commissioner Taylor and Commissioner Mills were there and probably can add some other context, but we thought it was important to, as we look back over AISs that had come to you all, we realized that was 2015, and some of the origin might have, and the rationale behind that decision-making may have eluded the conversation last week.
Commissioner Borowski.
Yeah, I just have a couple of questions about that. In the memo, it talks about that the city's toxic program staffs and environmental justice focus groups were part of that committee, as well as some of the members of this committee. Can you tell me what, if there were members from the development community, and if there were members from the targeted industries that were actually gave input to that committee on this overlay zone?
So there were a couple different groups. The subcommittee was comprised of sustainability commissioners, human rights commissioners, planning commissioners, and
including Rick Duncan.
Yeah, so we knew that part of the reason we selected the planning commissioner or sought out Commissioner Mills, Commissioner Duncan, Commissioner Taylor was with that background and that experience in the private development world and just understanding of that side of the issue. We also brought this issue to, or this product to the Local Government Affairs Committee of the Chamber, and they created their own industrial lands subcommittee of the Local Government Affairs Committee, and they provided feedback and review throughout the process.
Commissioner Randall.
I just wanted to thank you for, I'll just jump in on the suggestion to add the word offensive before odors. I think I appreciated that, and I also appreciated having to give us the code chapter 6 as far as the nuisances and relating it to that. I think adding offensive before odors addresses what my concerns were as far as evaluating that as best as you can when you're dealing with odors. And I think that, coupled with what we already have in Chapter 6, takes care of my concerns, at least in that area.
So what I would like to suggest, if we have particular questions on Zach's presentation or the AIS generally, and then we'll go point by point so that we can systematically make kind of a straw poll vote and give staff a sense of where we sit on each of the items. Are there any other questions? Is there anything else you want to explain in the AIS in terms of organization, or did Planning Commission have any questions specifically on the layout of the AIS?
Yeah, I wouldn't add anything, just if there were questions about the table that we included or the structure.
Commissioner Jaworski?
Yeah, the way I understand what you just said, Madam Chairman, is that we can either have general questions now, or we can ask our questions when you walk through each point.
Yeah, we'll walk through each point,
Okay.
but I just want to make sure the structure is generally understood, and if
Yep.
there's questions about their presentation. But you'll have time to ask another question, but if you need it in order to get yourself centered
No, that's
around the
fine.
discussion? Okay. Okay, so why don't we start with the first point, which is on page 2. And then if I inadvertently forget, at the very end, let's just make sure we covered everything. So I'll remember to do that. But if I don't, bring it up. So it's on page 2, and it's the LRAPA reference?
Page 2 or page 4? There's two different.
Oh, sorry, page 4. Why don't we go on the far right, page 4, LRAPA reference. And if we go down to the sub-bullet, suggest a way to address this concern. And this has to do exactly what one of the items Zach discussed. And there's a couple of suggestions by staff. So why don't we have a discussion? Commissioner Jaworski?
Yeah, I've asked this question before. Relatively, when you speak about this section under 1 and then suggested ways to address the concern, it's the pre-clearance letter from LRAPA, and then you indicate below that if LRAPA ceased to exist, then you would go to the Environmental Protection Agency. But then you state agencies could provide letters for their standards, but those are different from the LRAPA standards. And that's what I asked initially when we began some time ago. How different are those standards, and are those standards not so different that they would still provide environmental justice and address community concerns? Because I know I've worked with state emission standards, and by no means were they amenable to local residents in the area that were permitted uses.
I think our general response to that is to cross this bridge if and when we come to it. My understanding of the regulations is that they're the same. LRAPA is simply implementing
They're the same? Okay,
the
that's what I was
regulations
asking.
at the
Okay.
local level. But they may have a different process for issuing pre-clearance letters, and rather than try to presuppose what that process would be, we're suggesting that we address that through code maintenance in the future if it becomes necessary.
Commissioner Borowski?
I guess my question on that is, if it has to be addressed at code maintenance, I know how long it takes to do code maintenance, just because it happens every couple of years. Would that prohibit if, for example, LRAPA goes out and then somebody wants to go in and develop it and we have to maintain the code? Would it be better to say LRAPA or the regulatory body empowered at that time?
I think from a legal perspective, I prefer this approach. I can only give you some comfort in reminding you, for those of you who were around when Lane County Boundary Commission was decommissioned, when it was defunct. We made code changes, big code changes, before it actually officially was done. We got in and took care of the references and responsibilities that it had, and didn't wait for a package of upkeep of, code maintenance. The reason I don't like to include the or whatever sort of takes over is there's an assumption in there that A, something will, or that B, we may want to handpick how it works. We may not want to suddenly have an applicant being told they need to go to the EPA or DEQ and it not being clear. I think that there will be warning, because it'll be a budget issue if LRAPA goes away. And it can be an item we can bring back to you outside of maintenance.
Okay, then the next question would be, are there other areas of the code that LRAPA that would also have to be amended? So is it just this one that you have to have pre-clearance on, or is there other areas in the code?
I think this is the only one in the code.
9.
There may be references to LRAPA in the Metro Plan. I'm not sure. I think there probably are. I don't know.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Nicolello and then Commissioner Randall?
I just wanted to say that the new language based on the concerns that I had last week totally addressed those concerns, so thank you. I think this is a lot more clear about how the pre-clearance letter is going to be used. So I know I'm good to go with this language. Thanks, guys.
Commissioner Randall?
And I guess I just wanted to make sure, this really only affects the pre-clearance letter. If LRAPA goes away, there would still be some state regulations they would still have to meet regardless. And so it's not like they get a pass on just dumping pollution everywhere. It's just that pre-clearance letter that they might get a pass on if something hasn't happened
Correct.
initially. Okay, so there's still the state laws and regulations that would still have to be met.
That's correct.
Okay, if there are no other questions or comments, I'm going to move to a straw poll vote on this, and I'll start with the first option as presented in the AIS. So the first option that I want to get a straw poll vote, all planning commissioners in favor of changing the reference to LRAPA through co-maintenance to the appropriate agency at the time. So basically, what I'm hearing from staff is that you would just leave it, and we're not going to explicitly add through code maintenance. We're just going to leave it as is, and then we will make a side note that obviously that needs to happen, the code maintenance in the future if there was a shift, right? So all those in favor of leaving the language in terms of the reference of LRAPA as is? Unanimous? Okay, we'll go to the next sub-bullet. Our next bullet is applicability to land use applications. The sub-bullet is suggested ways to address this concern. This is, this particular section, actually, you can look at the table that was presented. Those are synonymous. That table is going to help you better understand what the land use applications are that are required for the particular uses. Just in the base zone, and then obviously with the new overlay. So discussion. Oh, do you want a minute? Okay. Staff, do you want to add anything?
Well, we conclude with a statement. We feel that the reference to land use applications should be removed because it felt duplicative and unnecessary, and it might be a little bit more clear if we took it out. So that's where we landed.
Commissioner Randall?
Well, and I'll just note that you did leave in land use application other than type 1. So type 1 is still in there. Is that correct? No?
So if you look at the extra packet that was submitted to you, this is sort of a...
That was just submitted today? Okay.
And so that has the actual proposed text included. And so under 9.4165 sub 1.
Can you, what page is that?
It's page 12 of 41 is how it's labeled on.
Okay, so you did. I know in the AIS it said, based on this comment, staff reviewed the uses that would trigger a land use application other than type 1 listed in addition to land division. So I was thinking type 1 stayed in, but I don't know that it.
Yeah, it looks like it's not being proposed.
Okay.
Yeah. Commissioner Nicolello.
And if I remember, to piggyback off of Commissioner Randall, the primary concern was that you would be required to do this for property line adjustments and for land division applications.
Right.
And so I think the way that the language is now, proposing a new building, change of use, additional use, or building expansion exceeds 25%. I think those are fair things to require as part of that, and that's also pretty standard with the rest of our code. So I know that addresses my concern with it. I don't know about anybody else.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, what we'll do, I'm going to have staff, as we move through this, when we get to the bullets, we'll actually then directly access and review the new draft that we were just given today, so we can make sure we're looking at what's being proposed. So for this subsection, suggested ways to address the applicability to land use applications, I'm going to get a straw poll vote that we remove the reference to land use applications, including the type 1 or type 2, from this section. So as written on page 12, 9.4165, subsection 2, it's been removed. All those in favor? Unanimous? Okay, we'll go to item 2, development standards. The first bullet, once again, applicability of land use applications. And I think we could probably, staff, can you direct us as to where this particular, it must be a different code section?
The next one, subsection 2, still on page 12. And if you track the comments on the right-hand side, those are the changes that we're recommending to you. So
Okay,
it's the next
perfect.
comment, ASG 3, deleted reference to land use application.
Okay, so actually in our last straw poll vote, I actually skipped. Our last one was actually item subsection 1, so 9.41651, which is once again deleted reference to land use
Exactly.
applications. So let me get a straw poll vote, make sure we keep this clean. So again, on subsection 1, all those in favor? Great. Now we're on subsection 2. Once again, it's still the same reference, remove the reference to land use applications. All those in favor to remove the reference to land use applications? Thank you. That's unanimous. So now we'll go to single business operation language. And the AIS has some suggested ways to address the concern, which is reflected on page 12, and that's 9.4165, subsection 2A. So the current language you'll see says single business. Development shall be limited to a single business, whether operated by owner, leasee, or renter, per tax law as shown. The rest of the language is as was submitted last time. Any discussions or questions? Commissioner Randall?
Yes, this was one that I think you had brought up, Commissioner Taylor, and I guess my question would be if you feel the changes address your concerns.
Yeah, it does, because I mean, the land use code, the use list, the categories include accessory uses to the main use. So a single business actually, I think, addresses my concern with operations.
That was my concern, because I'm not really familiar with how all of those types of businesses might work. And so I just wanted to
Yeah.
make sure that addressed what your concerns were.
Staff, is that correct? So essentially, you have an industrial main use. There can be accessory uses to that. For instance, in the employment districts, you can have even a small retail portion to your main use. You can have manufacturing, storage. You can have it to that main use. Is that correct?
That's right. And you
Okay.
could have, as you pointed out last time, a business that has several different functions within the business, and we didn't want to preclude that.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions, discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the language change in subsection 2A? Unanimous? Okay, so next to clarity of land affected by separation of uses, suggested way to address this concern. This one's a little bit more complicated, so can I have staff kind of explain to Planning Commission kind of how you approach this and the graph and the maps that are provided?
Yeah, so
Purpose.
Zach gave a short overview of the issue, the separation of uses, and we produced a map that shows this. Sarah made this map that has the 1,000-foot buffer from property designated for a school, park, or residential. So that's what this first side is, and it's labeled that way, 1,000-foot option for separating uses. And on the back side, we proposed a different way to implement this based on your discussion. And we're not necessarily recommending this, but we thought you'd want to see what the map looked like. So we labeled this one Campus Industrial Designation Option. And what that does is it clearly attaches the separation of uses to those properties designated campus industrial. So as shown on this map. So regardless of what happens in the future, as shown on the map. So that would be an alternative way to do it. Our feeling was that it was an intentional recommendation from the subcommittee to include the 1,000 feet, which is why we're not recommending changing from that. But based on your discussion, you're free to recommend whatever you feel is appropriate. Anything to add to that? That covers it.
Okay, so discussion, Commissioner Mills and then Commissioner Nicolello.
Yeah, a question for staff on this. It was mentioned earlier that the 1,000-foot was brought in a similar manner where it was used as a best practice in California. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
And so we've brought that into use here. And the basis for the 1,000 feet, why are we doing it? I just want to make sure we understand the basis for the need for the 1,000-foot separation. Are we talking just nuisance? we talking, are we talking health and safety? What is the basis for wanting that 1,000 foot? Not disputing, I just want to
Sure.
understand the reason.
The best practice that was pulled in from the California Air Quality Agencies, I forget which one, if it was San Joaquin, was based on particulate discharges, that 1,000-foot separation was necessary to limit your exposure to dust, particulates.
So that would be a health and safety.
Their health and safety, and the other was odors. So there was a lot of discussion in that California literature around exhaust and petroleum smells. So around a trucking terminal, for example, that with all the refueling activities, that you would want that to be at least 1,000 feet away from the school or the park, that sort of thing.
So there is a health and safety element to it in addition to, I want to say subjective environmental improvement to not have it in, and
Correct.
I'd say an environmental improvement. So I'm just trying to understand. To me, this feels like it's a health and safety, and I'll use the word environmental, not necessarily in an objective term, but in a subjective term, to understand why the 1,000-foot was necessary. But again, not disputing, just trying to understand the basis for it. So,
Thank you. Commissioner Nicolello?
Okay, so 2 points. I think the first one is, by separation, my immediate question is, are we saying that the entire use, the whole entire shebang, has to be 1,000 feet away from the abutting property line? So no trucking circulation could happen in that, no nothing.
Right. If the use is listed as a separated use, then that use would not be allowed in that area. But you're hitting on one of the administrative difficulties with setting back a use.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can
So
I-
that was evident through your discussion last week.
Yeah, so I see this map, and this map is actually really helpful, because sometimes it's really hard to determine, like, what does 1,000 feet actually mean? And I'm not an engineer, so I can't get in spatial recognition, unfortunately. So that one, the 1,000-foot buffer, and I'm from California, so I was part of the South Coast Air Quality Area, go team, and I absolutely think that a separation area is a super smart move, especially because we have government and education and parks and open space right there. That being said, it is important to note that it does wipe out a lot of those bottom tax lots. And also too, if your uses are completely separated, if I can't even put in trucking uses or things like that, ways for my business to actually get goods and materials to it and so on and so forth, these tax lots down here are essentially not developable. And once again, fully want to recognize the importance of having a buffer or separation area as we're referring to it. But the way that this might be interpreted, say for example, 10 years from now when maybe some of us are retired or, so on and so forth, not saying that anybody here is old enough to retire, but for separation though, I'm curious how that'll be interpreted. What can I do in that separation area? And if I can't do anything, we essentially lose 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, looks anywhere between 5 to 8 tax lots.
Right, for those specific uses, that is true. And we had a bit of conversation about the trucking terminal and the wholesale warehousing and distribution uses, especially because we could see them as being a component of other operations.
Absolutely,
and
exactly.
difficult to pin down their exact location. So that's part of the reasoning for giving you the option of looking at it in a different way, the other option being the based on the land use designation.
So I'll be really frank and say I don't know if this separation area is ready for prime time quite yet. I personally would be uncomfortable recommending it at this time simply because it does wipe out so many tax lots and it's really unclear as to what's allowed in it. And once again, thinking for what's going to be done 10 years from now. I know that all of us, are at the table and probably on the same page today, but thinking 10 years down the road. And maybe it'd be helpful to kind of hear from Emily some of her thoughts about how it could be interpreted. Well, what your interpretation is.
I think the only thing I'm sort of itching to make sure is on the record is that, the uses that are subject to this separation area are limited. So it's not wiping out these tax lots. It's just saying a portion of them can't be used for certain specific uses. There's a whole host of issues that the entire tax lot can be used for. So just, I don't think that this separation makes these parcels unavailable for development consistent with our expansion. I think what we tend to see is areas in the code that are problematic show themselves to be so. And in the context of dealing with a particular issue, sometimes we learn about what the code should say. I would love to see a little bit more clarity around what is included in a use and what is not. But I understand that's difficult. The list answers some of those questions, I think. So, and we also deal regularly with what we call primary uses and secondary uses. The term use kind of has a meaning in practice in the code. But for example, without this list, I might wonder, well, can you have an area where you're doing servicing the trucks for your use? Nope, that actually is included in one of the things that can't, that's separated. So there are a number of ways to go at clarifying. You could add things to this list of 1 through 11 that specify with more detail about what's included in the use, what's not. I mean, we've talked a lot about that term use and separating from use. It's one thing to say you can't build one building within 5 feet of a property line. This is harder to measure and understand. If we were talking about needed housing, I'd be more concerned. But legally, it's okay to have this, I think.
Yeah, legally, but I think from a legal standpoint and I'll be frank, from a practical standpoint,
Right.
Those are two different things.
So when you're talking practical,
Not all the
I go
times.
like this.
I appreciate making sure that we're legally thorough as well, which we should be. I think that I would personally, and I'll stop after this, I apologize for talking so much. I think I would personally like to see some better language around what's allowed in that separation area, and I understand that these uses are a segment of what's actually allowed, but there are a number of uses, and for example, I can see someone 10 years down the road who wasn't here at the table today saying, oh, well, a trucking terminal it's a prohibited use and perhaps you couldn't do trucking circulation within that buffer, within that separation area. And so making sure that we really articulate what that means. And maybe that's even something as simple as adding in language, and please keep in mind I'm doing this on the fly, so it might sound silly, but even something as simple as keeping in the following primary uses or something, but just something to help designate that, we're essentially saying that 11 different industries can't be built within that separation area, and that does impact the intent of this code.
I have Commissioner Borowski, then Commissioner Randall, and Commissioner Jaworski.
Thank you. So I have a couple of thoughts on this. I think that if we look at the map with the 1,000-foot separation, and it's from government and education, to me, if you look at the government and education, that's a panhandle lot, and that's going to be a driveway, basically, in my view. So now we're going to have to go 1,000 feet from a driveway. If you were to take that circle and flip it down to where the actual school is, the school is going to be more than 1,000 feet from Clear Lake Road. So I'm not as concerned about that. The other little one is it's because of that little section of commercial there, I believe.
No, it's the parks panhandles.
Oh, yeah, same thing, park panhandle. Okay. So to me, the 1,000-foot, I'm not so concerned about that. I think that the workaround of doing it and using the campus industrial zoning will work. And my question would be, a lot of these uses wouldn't be allowed in the campus industrial anyways. Is that correct?
Yes.
So to me, if we do it that way, we're taking care of what we're trying to do, which is buffer the parks and the residential areas. And we're doing that with campus industrial zoning, and we're not doing it with the fuzzy 1,000-foot buffer area. So I feel very comfortable with just doing the backside of this page as a way to get what we want here, and knowing that there is 2 driveways that are going to be possibly within 1,000 foot of perhaps a recreational vehicle manufacturer. And I think I'm okay with that. And I think it gets to what was the main emphasis of this.
Commissioner Randall.
Well, and I think Emily touched on some of the comments I was going to make, and I think really just thinking through this, we don't want a concrete batch mixing facility right next to a school. And so I think that was what brought a lot of this about. I think Commissioner Borofsky makes a good point as far as the panhandles, and I think I would be inclined to support that idea, because I think it really gets at what we're wanting to do and limit that in the campus industrial. And it doesn't eliminate all uses in campus industrial, just certain ones that we feel are potentially onerous, I guess, for lack of a better term, to be located immediately adjacent to parks and open space and schools.
Commissioner Jaworski and then Commissioner Mills.
Yeah, I had a couple of things. Only I should have looked on another map, but around the gray area, light, medium industrial, when you look toward the east and the north and the south to the southeast, southwest of the education thing, what is the designation of those properties there?
Immediately south of the school is residential.
No, I meant these blocks and through here.
Outside the urban growth boundary is agriculture.
So it's agriculture, and we don't see that ever being residential, where people would put residential in there, and then the restriction would really kill us.
No, although I will note there is a residential use north of the school lot. You can see sort of a small tax lot there on Clear Lake. There is a residential use there. I don't believe it's designated residential. There is a home, but it is designated agriculture.
So the way this is written, it says land designated rather than used, which, you know, an actual physical use there. I also understand in campus industrial, because I know up on Chad Drive, campus industrial there is allowed to put residences in some of the businesses. Would that then qualify and cause all this other area to then have 1,000-foot buffer around it if someone
Not
put
if
a
we
residence there?
implemented it this way, based on the designation, it wouldn't cause a problem.
Even though that someone put in this tax lot a residence?
Right? Yeah.
That's correct. The way that's drafted in the E1, the campus employment zone, is one unit, one dwelling unit that's an accessory to a major employment use.
Yeah, I know, but once they put that dwelling unit in it to the north in the light medium industrial, do you then draw a 1,000-foot buffer from that house?
No, it's still designated as
So it's the
industrial of some
designation
sort.
and not the use.
Actually, both options are based on designation. It's
Okay.
just one of them is measured 1,000 feet from land designated a certain thing, and the other one's based on just limiting it to the land designated another thing.
The only reason I bring that up is because part of the conversation by other commissioners is that in the park and in the school, it's so designated, but it's only a driveway. You know, and
Right.
here I'm saying this is designated this, but it's an actual residence, which we wanted to avoid. So I have some confusion with that. As you know, sometimes it works nice, sometimes it doesn't, and it should be clear in what you really want to stay away from, either the designated land or a residence, or actual physical use of something that's a park or where the school facility actually is,
Right.
or the playground or something. But just a point.
Commissioner Mills, Commissioner Randall, and then Commissioner Borofsky.
Yeah, I guess I wanted to first voice support for the industrial designation option as shown in the second, I'll say the second page, it's hard to tell which is which here, but that option, I guess I feel is more clear cut. And then I still have a question around under separation on the edited sheet that you've provided, page 13 of 41, under 11, where an exemption is provided. I think I mentioned this the last time I was here. An exemption for targeted industries.
Right. Not to cut you off too much, but we do have those listed as 4 different issues.
Okay,
So
I'll wait.
if we could finish on the mapping options first. we will address that exemption.
Commissioner Borowski?
I guess my question would be, are any of these uses allowed in campus industrial?
You know, I wish I had a code with me. I think
looking that up right
the
now,
only
actually.
possible one is the warehousing.
Because if they're not allowed, we could almost just take that whole section out.
If that's your recommendation.
Well, I mean, to me, it's, if we end up voting for this map,
Right.
I would just like to see, if those aren't allowed in that zoning, I would like it to, there's no need for us to double dip.
If you give me 2 minutes, I can look that up. I'm on the use table right now.
And that's fine. I mean, I think that's something staff could come back with in the meeting for tomorrow.
So I just want to add, and maybe Zach, you can add to this. I just wanted to note that as a subcommittee member of the Clear Lake Overlay, this is a very important item for Toxic's Right to Know program. And the representatives at the table were quite vocal, and this was a compromise. So know that we did have lengthy discussion about the viability of development versus environmental justice. So I just wanted you to know that when depending on what our recommendation is, it's likely that they will show up at council, just because there is obviously the impact doesn't just go to the east. There's a larger impact area. So I just wanted to bring that up. And the last item I wanted to also bring up, because it addresses Commissioner Nicolello's concern, which is my concern. Let's say what I'm uncomfortable with is the trucking terminal, for instance. That has a specific definition. But let's say somebody wants to develop a use that's allowed. And I really understand not having, let's say they site the building towards the back, and they have a parking lot in front. They want to actually have their trucks access it, and they've got some trucking capacity maybe in the back of the site where it would be allowed. What I wouldn't want to see is an accessory use like a trucking terminal, just because they're driving through the lot, be prohibited. So that's my only concern, is making sure that where it isn't prohibited, a use that is allowed doesn't have an accessory use that by interpretation, just because they're passing through to a section of their lot that actually would be allowed, that they wouldn't be allowed to get their trucks through. So that's where my concern is. There are just a couple uses like that, and one is trucking terminal, service station, that it's actually at the back half of the lot where it's allowed. So as long as there would be clarity with that, and I think that is easily, we can get there with that. But Commissioner Mills and then Commissioner Nicolello.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Commissioner Nicolello.
Thanks. So I just did a quick look through the use section for campus industrial, and I will say that these uses largely, just in a super quick review, largely match what's not permitted in campus industrial. I will also say too that trucking terminal, I just did a quick search, and it's only used in campus industrial, and it's only used in the industrial use section, and trucking terminals are not permitted in campus industrial. So I think that my primary concern was that the light, medium, industrial lots were going to be knocked out by this separation, but if it is contained to the campus industrial, I think that is a good compromise. I do want to acknowledge that the 1,000-foot buffer did come from the subcommittee, but I'll also say too that it's our job, I think, as a planning commission to try and take those recommendations and then do our best to also make sure that they meet the different needs of what we're trying to do here, and that they're also implementable in a way that still helps us achieve what we're trying to do here. So I think I'm good with the campus industrial designation option. I will say that do think that more clarity will still need to be provided around kind of what that separation looks like, though. You know, and obviously, too, I think staff should probably do a more formal review of what uses are permitted in campus industrial that might or might not be permitted under this separation.
Commissioner Mills and then Commissioner Jaworski. No, Commissioner Jaworski?
Yeah, we can talk about this a long time, about what's in there, what's not in there. I guess my question, I don't want to jump ahead too hard, but the people that want to go in there, they're allowed to come in for some adjustments. So my question is, can they go for adjustments to this?
No, you can't adjust uses.
The
Setback.
the separation is adjustable. Let's see, where is that line item? If you jump down to number 5.
Yeah, that's what I
clearly
think
notes
it's
that number.
adjustable, and that's, I just wanted to bring that up now, that we're talking about a lot of things that if it's not as clear as it should be, the developer can come in with an adjustment that could then be looked at very closely and allow that to occur.
I think
all I
it's
wanted.
important to look at the adjustment, though. You can't adjust the use, it's the setback. So just remembering what you're adjusting, just so that you know when you go to make a decision. Commissioner Mills.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that if, a couple of ifs, if all of the uses identified under 41652D are indeed prohibited in campus industrial, do we need D then, or could that be dropped?
I think if that was the direction you gave us to go with the campus industrial option, we would take a double check through after the meeting. But I think you're on the right track. It would make it moot to double prohibit the uses if they're already prohibited by the base zone.
Yeah, I'm saying that in that feels real clean, you know, but on the other hand, I'm saying that with a note of concern that on the environmental justice side, where we just take it and strike separation without making it clear, you know, what our thought process was in doing that in terms of what I think the campus industrial providing, the bulk of that separation requirement needed from residential and.
Yeah, I mean, from a drafting standpoint, probably what I would work with staff on would be taking what remains, if there are 2 or 3 on there that you still need to deal with, and we would address them under subsection 4 below prohibited uses, and specify more clearly that within the Clear Lake overlay zone, if the underlying designation is campus industrial, the following uses are also prohibited. So you probably see some drafting movement.
Oh, yeah.
Unless it's completely superfluous, which we'd want to make sure, you know, if it's completely duplicative, then we wouldn't need it.
Makes sense. Commissioner Borowski and Commissioner Nicolello, hang on one second. I just want to let you know it's 5 after 12. We had allocated an hour. So what I'd like to do is just note that. I think we have to get through these points. So I would like to propose another half an hour, and if we can just be efficient with our time. Okay, Commissioner Borowski and then Commissioner Nicolello.
I was just going to say, let's move to, I move to use the campus.
have to move.
Well, I know, but to move it along,
Go
do the straw poll,
Just wanna,
to do the campus industrial, and ask staff to come back with a recommendation whether or not the sections are needed or if it's covered.
So Commissioner Nicolello.
I have a question that I can ask staff in an email. I think the other thing too is I would also recommend that staff to maybe work with Beyond Toxics and see if this is something that would be a suitable compromise to them, and if this, I think they're one of the environmental justice folks there, and then whoever else is there, just to circle back with them, and if they look at that and are still very uncomfortable with it, then that would be really good to include that correspondence as part of the council deliberations, so at least council can act on that, because of course we can't continue on that record now.
Right. Commissioner Borowski.
Well, I think if you're going to do that, you need to reach out to all the interested parties. I think you would have to reach out to the chamber and to the other people as well.
I don't think we need to get into this. This was just a quick suggestion, and we also have a future public hearing process for people to weigh in.
Okay, so I'm going to proceed with a straw poll vote, as Commissioner Barofsky suggested. So all those in favor of basically substituting the current map with this map, which is the Clear Lake Overlay Separation of Uses Area Campus Industrial Designation option. Did you have you're voting. I was like, you're ready to go. And then we would either have staff report back. They might need to basically delete this section or relocate it to a different section, and we'll leave that homework up to staff. All those in favor? Okay, all those opposed? Okay, we've got 5 in favor, 1 opposed. Okay. So we'll move to the next.
Yeah, that was a big one.
That was a big one.
Thank you. So the next one is the blast furnaces reference.
Yeah, that one's
Hopefully
easy.
we could be quick.
That
We
one-
agree with
so-
Commissioner Mills.
All,
Thank you, staff.
everyone, straw poll will vote. All those in favor of removing the reference to blast furnace. Okay, that's really good.
For the audience, blast furnaces are something that are associated with what I'll call integrated steel making. They're typically, of the order of $500 billion facilities, and none have been built in North America in the past 60 years. So I don't expect there'll be any ones built soon, certainly not in Eugene.
Okay, so we have the next item. I'm going to let staff quickly talk about it if you need to, and it has to do with the wholesale warehousing and distribution separation, which might actually be moot, so I'm not sure we
Exactly.
need to actually talk about it.
Well, I think we do. I think we need to address the concern that Commissioner Mills brought up last time, which is, do we provide special exceptions for targeted industries or not? I think that was the gist of your question.
Yes.
So if this stays in your recommendation to separate this use, the wholesale warehousing and distribution, we had proposed leaving in the exemption for targeted industries, and we clarified that they would be, that the wholesale warehousing and distribution component would be an accessory to the main use, just trying to make that clear in terms of degree of impact and scale of the use. But that was our suggested compromise in that case.
So I'm not quite sure how to vote on this, considering that we just voted to actually remove it. So if this does end up in language in another part of the code, maybe that's how we address it. Commissioner Mills, this is your question, so.
My concern is, and I'll be looking for it showing up other places, and I'll still have the same concern if it does, because as I understand, the initial separation requirement was brought in as a need to ensure health and safety for residents in the area. And we said, okay, we're taking the 1,000 feet out and we're relying on campus industrial to do that, and I support that. But now we're saying, okay, but except for this kind of operation, which we know, if it's not, which we know or we believe or we've decided or designated as being unhealthful to live near, now we're saying, but if it's targeted, it's okay. And I think that, you've got a bit of we've got some salesmanship to do here, if you want to look at it from that standpoint, in terms of we're taking away the 1,000-foot separation and we're relying on campus industrial. Then we're going to make an exception that allows this use, which decided we've designated as being unhealthy to live near. So I don't think we can have it both ways. I think it needs to be out. I support the proposal for the use of campus industrial, but I have a concern of leaving an exemption here for targeted industries, because I think that's counter to what the health and safety concerns are that we're trying to address.
Commissioner Nicolello, when you were looking at the list, can you remind me, in the campus industrial, was wholesale warehousing and distribution not allowed?
Just give me one moment, please.
Okay, is there someone else that has a question, concern? No. I mean, it is obviously relevant. It would be great if we could move through this item too, if it is relocated to a different section in the code.
Yeah, it may be moot because I'm remembering that it's not an allowed use,
Okay.
and therefore it would just be treated as an accessory use anyway.
Yeah, so we just allow the code base zone to manage that.
Okay.
Okay, so why don't we just take a quick straw poll vote that, go ahead.
So, just as a quick clarification, wholesale warehousing and distribution is permitted in campus industrial?
E1.
Yes, E1. So just as a clarification.
Okay.
So that is one of the,
It's permitted as a primary use.
yeah.
So this was one I remember the subcommittee having a lot of discussion on, just for your information, in terms of impacts. I suppose we could, as Emily had previously suggested, just move this to being a prohibited use in the E1 zone. The one thing I would mention in regards to that is just that there have been a number of different conversations happening around the food and beverage manufacturing industry, and this being a necessary use of shared facilities in terms of a food hub or food distribution center for Eugene for that industry. In that case, we would treat that shared dock or shared storage facility as an accessory use anyway. So I think this belt and suspenders was really kind of what we were trying to get at with the subcommittee, but may end up being unnecessarily complicated now that we're getting to this level of review. Anything to add to that? Yeah. We were trying really hard to come up with language that would be clear, that would show that the city was supportive of shared food and beverage manufacturing facilities. It's just been a real focus of a lot of the economic development conversations for this area. So that was the intent behind trying to make targeted industries, or even more specifically, food and beverage manufacturing, make it clear that the city is trying to support that.
So can I ask a quick question? So wholesale warehousing and distribution is allowed in light, medium industrial?
E1, campus industrial.
Campus industrial.
But is it allowed?
It is permitted
Yes.
E1,
One,
E2,
two.
I2, and I3.
So there's more flexible, there's more sites that
That's true.
the food and beverage industry can actually locate within this area.
That's right.
There's lots.
And in addition, if the primary use were manufacturing, they would be allowed outright in the E1 zone with warehousing and distribution as an accessory use.
Okay, Commissioner Mills and then Commissioner Borowski.
Pass.
Commissioner Borowski.
So just for a clarification on my thing, so would the operation that Glory Bee is doing right now, that would be basically considered what we're talking about right now? Glory Bee is a wholesaling, distributing, and of food industry, right?
Yeah, I don't know how they're classified in the code right now, whether they're primarily manufacturing or primarily distribution. You often run into this where they have components of both.
So,
Then Nancy's Creamery, I would say, is clearly manufacturing.
yeah,
But Glory Bee, I don't know without doing some more research.
okay.
Commissioner Nicolello.
I think maybe just for the purposes of efficiency, it sounds like this one requires a little bit more research and discussion before moving forward. And I think that, especially on the wholesale warehousing and distribution piece, I guess I'm kind of, I really wouldn't want us to do anything that would really restrict us supporting the targeted industries as we've identified them, while of course still wanting to meet that balance of not having anything that would impact government education, parks and open space. So I think maybe it'd be nice if staff could work on this a little, look at this one a little bit more and then come back.
So, thank you. I'm going to honor Commissioner Mills' request at the beginning, and for the purposes of informing staff, which gets at your comment, Commissioner Nicolello, is have a straw poll vote. Those, because as it's been identified, this is one of the prohibited uses unless providing accessory use to the business. And Commissioner Mills, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're saying because we basically are recommending moving forward with this, that we should honor and just make wholesale warehousing and distribution not allowed. Is that what you're saying? I just wanted to.
That's a logical progression. That's why I didn't speak, because that's where this is headed, and I think we need to be real clear on what that means if we provide that prohibition. And then I have a serious problem with the prohibition being exempted for targeted industries that we know of now at this point in 2017, but we may not know in 2027. So I'm very concerned about that. So quite frankly, I need a little time to think about this.
Okay,
because,
so
where of the two conflicting requirements here and where this is taking us. So I'll be very interested to hear what staff has on
okay,
this.
so it doesn't sound like we really need to take a straw poll vote on that. Commissioner Borowski, I'll let you go, and then I would recommend maybe what Commissioner Nicolello is stating. Let's see what happens with the code based on our prior vote, and see what your recommendation is.
Can I just
Commissioner
insert
Borowski.
myself really
Yeah.
quick? It's okay that I'm confused as long as someone else isn't here. So is it clear to staff what the policy direction is from the commission? Like, you're asking staff to come back and prepare everything, but personally, I'm sitting here not quite sure what a consensus or what a majority of you wants in terms of, it sounds like generally the group prefers the campus industrial as the bright line test, not 1,000 feet. So it'd be good to kind of know about that. Mm-hmm. And then whether or not, in doing so, the proposal from staff, as I understand it, is that within that campus industrial designation, this specific list of uses becomes prohibited. So we're not measuring 1,000 feet from anything anymore, because drawing that line kind of captures what needs to be captured. And then if that's the case, going down this list, that's okay for anything, and this is, I think, where the rub is. That's, if it's already prohibited in campus industrial, you're not wanting to add a use back in. I think I understand that.
Right.
But if it's actually already allowed in campus industrial, those are the ones you're kind of having you want staff to look at in more detail.
Yeah, I do have a thought on that. I think there are three questions, policy questions. Yeah. Following the last vote, I understand the last vote, your preference is to use the second map. But around the warehousing and distribution use, I think the first question is, do we prohibit it in the campus industrial zone? That was originally proposed.
Right.
The second question, we're suggesting clarifying that it would still be okay as an accessory use, which it is already in the code. So that's a clarifying question. And then the third question is, should we exempt targeted industries or not? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, because I think we could do straw polls on those
Yeah.
issues.
Can I?
Right now.
Can I speak? Well, can I?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
I just want to make sure she was
Right.
finished.
And it kind of speaks to some of these things. We've been talking about targeted industries, and I'm getting to the targeted industry part of it. There's a lot more targeted industries in the comprehensive plan than just food and beverage. You know, if we look at advanced manufacturing, heavy machinery is a targeted industry. Okay, now that may not be allowed in C1, but there's a lot of other targeted industries. So for me, the best way to get at this and to get at what the committee recommended with this 1,000-foot separation is not allow it in that section, with the warehousing and that, and not allow it for targeted industries or whatever in campus industrial. I think that's the best way to honor what that committee worked on, to try and buffer the impacts on the parks and the school and the residential. And also, there is other areas in the area that this would be allowed. And as an accessory, leave it if it's an accessory to the main problem.
Commissioner Randall, Commissioner Nicolello, and then Commissioner Jaworski. Commissioner Nicolello?
Terry, you mentioned something about prohibiting the wholesale warehousing and distribution as a use in E1. staff, just something to maybe keep in mind, because we don't want a lot of people who are, we don't want to create a huge non-conformance situation.
Oh, it wouldn't apply outside this area.
Okay.
That is a
That's what I wanted to
clarification.
clarify.
Just for here.
Okay.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Jaworski?
Yeah, the more we talk, the more I sort of get confused. I don't understand what the issue is. It seems to me that if someone comes in here and you're a targeted industry, you can have associated warehousing and whatever. If you're not a targeted industry and you put something in, it can be an accessory to what you're doing. If you don't like any of those two options, at least for right now, you can go across the street and you can put it in campus industrial. I don't understand the problem, so that's where I am. I don't understand what the whole issue is, if it can really address development concerns in either case there. So, if someone can clarify to me why that's a problem.
Well, it's because of differing opinions.
Okay, so that's all
yeah.
it is, yeah, okay.
So do we want to try to do a straw poll vote?
I
I
think we
know.
wanted to do a
Yeah, on the
more
three
than one
items.
straw poll. I
Yeah,
heard Terry, right?
yeah.
I would like that.
I think that makes sense.
Okay.
And you've got them succinctly kind of outlined, so
Right.
why don't you guide that?
Okay, good. So the first question is, do you want to prohibit this use, wholesale warehousing and distribution, in the E1 zone within the Clear Lake overlay?
Completely, or could you be clear on primary and accessory?
Yeah.
Prohibit as a primary use.
And just a clarifying question, it is in E1 currently, that is not a prohibited use.
Correct.
So that would be a prohibition on E1 use in this area,
Right.
right?
Because of its proximity to the schools, the
That's right.
parks, and the,
Very much based on this map and trying to arrange the land uses in a way that's compatible with surrounding land uses.
I'm in favor of that.
Okay, show of hands. 2 in favor.
Right?
I'm really uncomfortable doing a straw poll on this right now.
Okay, then don't raise your hand.
Yeah.
She just wanted to
Okay.
get a sense
This
of.
is tough.
Yeah.
I don't want to make straw poll votes even without enough information.
Can I,
And I get that there's counsel to look over it too, but still.
could I just insert a comment here? The reason I'm voting for this is to, I think, respect the subcommittee's work in limiting some of those uses specifically in proximity to the parks and the schools and that. And so that's why I'm voting in favor of that. And I think by pulling in what we're doing on the 1,000-foot separation into the zone, I think we need to respect that. And so that's why I'm voting in favor in the straw poll.
Okay, I'll vote in favor.
Hang on one second. Commissioner Mills?
Terry, you already said this, and I just want to make sure I'm not already forgetting it. And that is, your question is regarding the accessory use or the first use?
The primary use.
Primary.
Okay, thank you.
So do we want to try this again?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
All those in favor of prohibiting wholesale warehousing and distribution as a primary use in the campus industrial designated area of the Clear Lake overlay zone?
Or,
Okay. Okay. So the next question is
I didn't hear the vote.
4 to 2.
4 to 2.
Maybe if the
We're
chair could
assuming
just
two.
clarify and
So-
state the
Yeah,
outcome.
school right in
So the
middle, right?
outcome, there's 4
I don't
in favor.
understand this at all.
Sorry, hang on one second. There's 6 of us total. There were 4 in favor. 2, let's find out all those opposed.
And
So
I,
are there 2 opposed? Let's just finish the straw poll vote, just for the sake of, and then afterwards. All those opposed? 2. Okay. Commissioner Mills?
this is, as Reese mentioned, it's a very difficult vote. And my concern, and the reason I voted against, was the fundamental thing we're here for is to provide employment opportunity. And I'm quite worried if we start restricting primary uses, particularly in these areas, that we reduce their value and their prospective usefulness to providing what they're being set aside for. So that's why I voted the way I voted. And I still have concerns about it, but having a way here.
Yeah. So, you want to go to the next item?
Yeah, and then I'll hope that we still have quite a bit left to
Yeah, I
get through,
know.
actually, in Clear Lake. So, trying. The second question is, do you support clarifying the language as is suggested in the red text or the track changes text in your PC agenda, page 6? We've clarified the language to say, unless provided as an accessory use. So this is consistent with the vote you just took and clarifying that accessory would still be okay as it is currently in the code.
All those in favor?
In favor.
It's unanimous.
Okay. Last issue is, would you like to exempt Eugene's targeted industries, which I would point out are contained within the comprehensive plan, so the code would reference the comprehensive plan at whatever state it is in terms of its listing of targeted industries, to your point about future targeted industries. So the question is, do you want to exempt Eugene's targeted industries as listed in the comprehensive plan from this prohibition?
Yeah.
This is, I don't think we can talk about this without having some clarification.
Yeah.
And I think, well, here's the question. Without looking at the language here, is it the intention of the Planning Commission to allow these things as accessory uses, everything on this list, basically, as an accessory use if the primary use is otherwise allowed?
Just the warehousing. We're just talking
just
about
the
warehousing.
So 1 through 10, you can't do whether it's accessory or primary.
Because it's not allowed.
It's not allowed on the base zone.
Okay. Just checking. And 11 would be a partial allowance if it's associated with a targeted industry. And that's the
That's the
question on
vote,
the table.
that's the vote that's on the table now.
Well, actually, the vote just passed that 4-2,
Accessory.
you want to prohibit it
Yeah.
as a primary
I mean,
use, so it's
So
moot.
there is
It's
no
moved.
accessory.
There is no, that's why I was
what I was thinking,
confused,
yeah.
actually.
Okay.
Well, there's straw polls, so.
Yeah. No, that's right. So,
Just,
Yeah.
Commissioner Randall.
sorry, just to clarify, because we just did the straw poll to clarify the accessory use, whether it's a targeted industry or not, it would still be allowed as an accessory use.
Correct.
So the third one is a moot.
Takes care of it.
Yeah, the third vote, we really don't need to have.
Okay, good. Take care of that one.
So now we're at performance standards. The first bullet, so once again, we're on page 4, performance standards. The first bullet is actually a bullet that we've already discussed 2 times. This is just a different code section, and it has remove the applicability of land use applications. So all those in favor? It's code section subsection 3. It was basically subsection 1, subsection 2, now we're in subsection 3. I should have just said all of them, but they're all separate bullets. So let's just get a quick straw poll vote. All those in favor of removing it? Okay, it's unanimous. Okay, another big one, measurability of odors, emissions, and vibrations. Staff, can you please let us know if you have any, it's in our AIS, it's the subsection relevant adopted nuisance code. Staff has provided us a description of what's currently in our nuisance code in chapter 6. Staff, do you have any additional comments?
I don't think so. We're recommending adding the word offensive to be more consistent with the language already in our nuisance code.
Any other questions, items of discussion? Commissioner Borowski?
What is offensive?
It's complaint-based. So it's a process that gets worked out through our complaint system through the enforcement staff.
Already in chapter 6.
It's in
Okay,
chapter
so
6.
I guess then my question is, who is the arbitrator of what is considered offensive? What's the level? Who makes that final decision that it's offensive?
It would be our code enforcement supervisor.
And is it appealable?
Yeah.
It is. It goes to a hearings official. And this is language that was developed.
No, I'm
with
trying to figure out the process. If somebody comes and says that's offensive and somebody else says, I don't believe it's offensive, what is the process for determining offense.
It's a good question. Commissioner Mills?
For the public, the reference being made to Section 6, 6.010, I'm going to get this right here, Section F, odors, premises which are in such a state or condition as to cause an offensive odor or which are in an unsanitary condition. And this is kind of what's been brought into the discussion here in order to use the term offensive. And I just want to say that as I read Section 6, to me, that's a condition of maintenance or improper maintenance or a condition that can be corrected with a cleanup or something like that. What I'm reading into our language is that it could be an odor that's associated with a normal operation in conducting business. And we can say, yeah, well, I don't mind that smell, but if I have to smell it 24 hours a day, it's offensive. And this will also be a very subjective thing. So I have a concern about this section and still having this in here. Having said that, I'll probably vote for this just to move us on. But I still feel that this is, I think this is one that should be brought to the attention of City Council so they can knowingly address this.
Commissioner Nicolello?
So, offensive is a really great clarification, and it ties into the rest of our code, so thank you for doing that. And I think that there's a few things in here that really help with this standard. It is subjective, we mentioned that Commissioner Randall has superior sense of smell compared to some of the rest of us. But I think that the key part here is with the proposed use are not noticeable at the property line by a human observer relying on human senses without the aid of a device. And so I think that gives us a line to kind of work with. And then also too, it's been pretty well legislated, I think, through the state that there's a standard of, reasonability with this. And so it's kind of what can a reasonable person get from this. And so I'm comfortable with this. Plus also too, there's the permit requirements of the state, LARAPA. So if I was an applicant who was applying for something, I would also be required to do mitigation through LARAPA and through the state if I had an odor that was perhaps offensive to folks enough so it could not be noticeable at the property line. And I would be held, accountable to making sure that I stayed in line with those permits. And anybody here who's worked with the state knows they do a pretty decent job at making sure that you do. So I'm okay with moving forward with this. I think this is a good addition that's in line with the rest of the code.
So let's go ahead and take a straw poll vote. All those in favor of leaving all the text as it is in this section with the exception of adding offensive. All those in favor? All those opposed? Okay, that's 5-1. 5 in favor, 1 opposed. We'll move to the next section. In the AIS, it's section 4. And in the code section, it's subsection 4. We haven't moved from the main section, was 9.4165, subsection 4. We're talking about two separate uses, reconstituted wood products manufacturing. Zach went into that in his introduction. Staff recommends no change. The other, once again, Zach went into colored glass manufacturing in detail, and staff recommends no change. So are there any quick comments by Planning Commissioner or questions? Commissioner Borowski, Commissioner Mills.
Yeah, I'm still going to have to vote against the reconstituted wood product manufacturing. I think that it's advanced wood product manufacturing is called out in our comp plan, and to put this in as a prohibited use in the whole zone, I think is irresponsible, considering the nature of our resource-based industries in this area. I think that it can be done responsibly, and prohibiting it outright, I think, is going to cost jobs.
Okay, Commissioner Mills and then Commissioner Randall.
Just a quick confirmation from staff. I believe you've already spoken to this and how this, my question that I wrote down here, what is the criteria that was used to set this? And I think I understood that this was included as a result of the focus group subcommittee work that they determined that this should be an excluded group. Is that correct?
That's
Local
correct.
research.
Yeah, and local, so local research that we shared with the subcommittee
And-
through our work.
Can I get a few seconds on what characterization of that local research?
It was documentation pulled from the Toxics Right to Know program and looking at who the leading emitters were in the zip code 97402, which is the Bethel West, Northwest Eugene neighborhood. So it was
Existing emitters.
existing emitters, yes, exactly.
Thank you.
So the point that I was trying to make earlier was that we were being deferential to council's original direction to err on the side of environmental justice concerns.
Commissioner Randall?
I guess to kind of tag onto that, I guess my question would be, you list that a reconstituted wood product use or manufacturer is sitting at number one. How old is that business? Is it because I'm just thinking with newer technology and newer businesses, that may have changed. And is it a fairly old company? Is it?
This was data from 2013, but I'm not
as
sure.
far as how old the factory or facility is?
It's a long-standing operator here in town.
Commissioner Nicolella and then Commissioner Borowski.
I apologize. I'm afraid I don't really know what you mean by reconstituted wood products manufacturing. I don't believe it's defined anywhere in the code. I've seen lumber and wood products before, but I'm not really sure what reconstituted wood products manufacturing.
So it would be particle board, plywood.
Plywood, particle board.
Plywood would be considered?
Plywood might not be, but particle board would
Yeah.
be.
Particle board, certainly, yeah.
So, has staff put together a use definition or anything for this? That might be helpful. Just because it sounds like we've got maybe some different perspectives on what reconstituted wood is, and I know I think it would be helpful for me personally to kind of get a better definition of that. I'm not up to date on the wood products industry.
Commissioner Borowski and then Commissioner Mills.
Yeah, that kind of goes to my thing as well. When you say reconstituted wood products, that goes to an MDF plant. I think that's what they're trying to get away from. But it also, like we've seen, there's new technologies that are coming out that they're talking about building 7-story buildings out of wood, and that is going to involve glue lamming beams and those types of things, which somebody could say is reconstituting wood products. So I think that definition is too vague at this point to be put in as a prohibited use. If you say we don't want an MDF plant, then say I don't want an MDF plant because of the glue and the toxic from that. But to say reconstituted wood is taking away way too many options of future technologies, especially since in your targeted industries, advanced wood products is one of your targeted industries. So I think you're going a little too broad with that brushstroke of what the term is, reconstituted wood products. Because if we're looking for sustainability, reusing wood products is something that is right at the top of sustainability.
So can I recommend for this one, and then if we want to take a straw poll vote, we can. So what Commissioner Borowski's talking about is cross-laminated timber or lumber, and I just want you to remember what we're talking about in the Clear Lake Overlay Zone. This is an environmental justice. This is the City of Eugene's first kind of overlay that is focused on environmental justice. There was a process around it, so I think some of the questions that really what we're talking about here is not understanding some of these industries. And do they still have the polluting impacts or the impacts that were addressed by the various stakeholders or subcommittee members? These future industries, do they have that same impact? So I guess what I would suggest, just because cross-laminated timber is kind of the emerging industry right now, if you haven't done research on it, maybe look into it, and then we can bring that back at the special meeting. Does that seem legitimate? Or do you want to have a vote to remove it or not?
I really think even more just doing research, a definition of what reconstituted wood products would look like
in the code.
Yeah, the only thing is we don't have a way of defining it yet until we determine what it's going to include. So having them do that, and then obviously a definition would come along with it. Commissioner Mills?
I once again, I want to caution everybody against working with a snapshot in time and putting something down for posterity. Because
Sure.
things will change, and reconstituted wood products today will be different from reconstituted wood products 5 or 10 years from now, as are the environmental standards are different now than they were 10 years ago for new and existing plants, and speaking specifically about MDF in that case. So I'm very sensitive to the fact that how this prohibition came about, but I can't support it.
Okay, Commissioner Jaworski?
Yeah, so if this definition wasn't in there, or even if something considered reconstituted wood products manufacturing came in, they'd still have to meet the air quality standards and emission standards that are there.
Of course.
So what's the issue, is my question. If they can meet all those standards and LaRapa says they're fine, I don't understand why they would be prohibited. That's.
Well, it is a balance. I mean, the committee working on this was really trying to be innovative and address things in a way that no city in Oregon ever had before. And so we are trying things that have not been tried before in a land use code in Oregon. But let me check something with Emily. Is it okay in this process to, but what's on my mind is that I hear your concerns and wanting to pass along your concerns to council, but I'm wondering if their recommendation could be stated something like, if we took a straw poll and you all agreed that this was not the right language, do we have to nail it by tomorrow, or can we say our concern is this, and we want you to come up with a recommendation that recognizes the concern?
You can do the latter. You can, when some of these things you've said, we're concerned about something, we'd like you to look closely at it. You could also say, we think this term needs to be defined specifically to make sure that we are not excluding things that we would consider to be targeted industries. Provide the amount of clarity you want. And that's acceptable. This is a non-binding recommendation, so we're more comfortable with that kind of thing.
Actually, why don't we get, just to move this forward, give them some direction, actually, Emily, restate that, because that's actually a very good straw poll vote, just to get a sense of where people land. Obviously, if you're confused, just don't vote that you're going to abstain, but it will give them a sense. So this section needs to be defined. So all those in favor of defining this section, and we have a concern about excluding this from the Clear Lake Overlay District, especially for the targeted industries. All those in favor of kind of just passing that general direction to staff?
Yeah, what?
We have concern about excluding this use type, especially as it relates to the targeted industries.
As well as a definition.
As well, it needs to be defined. All those in favor? It's unanimous.
Thank you. We'll do our best to get something into your materials for tomorrow.
Perfect. It gives them, I mean, it's a short turnaround.
And if
That's
we
why
can't,
we're addressing
it
this.
goes forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, to some degree, there's a political component to some of these decisions that make sense that city council might take a
I
closer
fully
look.
think that it
Yeah.
does rest with the city council.
Yeah.
Commissioner
And that's actually
Jaworski.
very helpful.
Yeah, I still just don't understand that if any industry coming in meets all of the emitter pollution requirements that LaRapa and everybody's looking at, why would we exclude it? I still don't understand that. If it passes the test, it should be able to go in. If there's one that we're not excluding that doesn't meet those standards, it shouldn't be allowed to go in. So that's where I'm confused.
Commissioner Jaworski, this is, as Terry explained it, we're actually taking an additional proactive step forward, and that is identifying that although there might be LRAPA standards, they don't necessarily address environmental justice issues like we're trying to do now.
Concentration of these kinds of uses in a particular area of the city is really the reason why council directed us to look at additional standards in this area. Adding additional uses that may be permitted in terms of an air quality permit, would add to the overall cumulative effect in the neighborhood, and
So
that's
LARAPA
what we were
doesn't
looking
measure the
at.
cumulative effect? They're not
They
looking at?
don't have the tools to measure cumulative
Really?
effect.
Okay. How about our state?
Nothing that we found really got at that issue.
That's what the EJ is all about.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's what,
Okay.
yeah. Okay, so let's move to the next, we're definitely, I'd love it if we could step it up a bit. So next subsection, clarity of terms, land division and property line adjustment. And that,
Were you good with the colored glass?
nope, sorry, I did, thank you. Colored glass manufacturing, you heard Zach's Zach's description, staff recommends no change. So I'm just going to actually take a straw poll vote based on Zach's explanation. All those in favor of basically leaving colored glass manufacturing as it stands, so it's within the code now, all those in favor? Unanimous. Okay, now we'll go to the next section. Thank you, Commissioner Nicolello. Clarity of terms, land division and property line adjustment. This was Commissioner Nicolello's point that she brought up. Staff has some suggestions to just make sure that it's clear. So I'm going to specifically target Commissioner Nicolello. Does that address your concern? I'm trying to find the code section.
It is
There's number,
9.4170 on page 1441.
does anybody have any questions?
Good clarification in our view.
Yeah, this is fine.
Okay, all those in favor of addressing Commissioner Nicolello's concerns with the suggested language? Unanimous? Okay, the next item was Commissioner Brodsky's, and it's the adjustment review item. And basically, the suggestion by staff was to remove this requirement for adjustment review. Commissioner Jaworski?
Yeah, I have a problem with removing this. I mean, all of this UGB expansion and everything is something called job creation areas. And I mean, if we're looking at job creation and we remove a requirement for job creation, that doesn't make any sense to me. From the statistics that were presented at our last meeting, it was indicated that most of the businesses already in the area are meeting or well exceeding this requirement. I would also think that using the extreme, if there's 75 acres and it requires 750 employees, that this also could come in as a requested adjustment if they only have 710.
So let me clarify. There is no requirement to come in at 10 employees per
Just for an
acre.
adjustment.
It was in the proposed overlay zone as a criterion to approve an adjustment to a standard such as a setback.
Just an adjustment.
Right. So we had included in the adjustment review criteria a requirement to be on the high side of employees per acre. And after discussion and also discussing with Beth, we felt like that was too high of a bar for an adjustment, and that's why we're proposing taking it out.
So if someone wants an adjustment, they would have to currently meet that criteria. If they don't meet that criteria, they can't get an adjustment?
Correct.
There is no criteria for when they bring in how many jobs they
No.
should be creating in this area. Although I thought this expansion was for job creation. You would think you would have some benchmarks that you're looking for businesses coming in.
It's kind of all over the board from the different uses. From warehousing is very low employees per acre up to offices. They're very, very high.
I have Commissioner Nicolello and then Commissioner Brodsky.
I think that this change looks great. I think the other thing too is the 750. I think when Beth had spoken to us, that was way above and beyond even what we have nowadays. And so I think it's also having benchmarks, making sure that our benchmarks are practical. And I think the other thing too is knowing, and this is a kind of a good thing I think for us to overall keep in mind, is knowing what's appropriate to address through land use code and then knowing what's appropriate to address through other venues, whether that be subsidies or other kinds of opportunities to accelerate different kinds of industries. But land use code should not be your silver bullet for things like that. That's when we get bad code. So I think this is an awesome correction, and I'm really in favor of it.
Commissioner Borowski.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm on board with the amendment. I still I have another question about the adjustments. It's section 36, and number C, if you could just give me, so basically to get an adjustment, you have to meet all of these criteria. The one that we're taking out would be out of there, but section C says development will increase access to open space and improve ecological functions of natural features on site. To me, that, I don't know what that means, and it kind of is getting, like we're throwing stuff in just so that they have to meet certain things. And what that brought up was, it kind of was one of those when we were doing the Oaks, and well, what is an amenity? So to me, what is increased access to open space? Does that mean that they put pavers down? So when we're putting these things in, and you have to meet all of these things, I would like, if it's going to be adjusted, that the things that we put in actually mean something and are there for a reason. And I just didn't know if somebody could explain how C made it in there and what it's there for.
Sure. The subcommittee drafting the code was grappling with what was appropriate direction to take with the adjustment, recognizing that things like the 1,000-foot separation and other development standards may need some wiggle room. We landed on trying to abide by the triple bottom line concepts that council and this community expect. So you get 10 not dwelling units per acre, employees per acre, as an attempt to recognize the economic leg of that stool. This was an attempt to advance the environmental leg of the stool of sustainability. So when you think about, if you go back out spatially and think of that area that's being developed, you've got a lot of wetlands, you've got some natural drainage ways. So the idea that the subcommittee came up with here was thinking of ways that those natural features, those wetlands, become an amenity within the larger 900 acres of development, as opposed to being just kind of sequestered behind closed doors and not being an amenity for the employees. But in any case, the land use process and the adjustment review process, for those of you that are familiar with that, becomes a subjective exercise as people defend going forward with something other than the real black and white regulatory structure of the code.
So I just want to clarify that it doesn't actually mean that you can't develop of it. So let's say that the majority of the site is wetlands. It doesn't require you to actually do. A great example, for instance, is eWeb. eWeb's facility at Roosevelt Boulevard actually would check. It would actually meet that. It's dealing with its stormwater system right in front of the building. It's sited the parking lot in the building in order to take advantage of that as amenity as well as a facility for their stormwater.
Okay, so if one of these sites is a grass field now and has no wetlands on it, how do I mow a section of the grass field, and is that considered improving the ecological function of that site?
Given the anticipated large-scale development in the area, they're going to have to meet stormwater requirements. Our city's stormwater requirements assume kind of low-impact development, green infrastructure type. So there's a variety of different ways I think development can meet this criteria if it's necessary.
Okay.
Adjustment.
All right. Thank you.
Commissioner, did you have your hand up before Commissioner Jaworski? Commissioner Nicolello and then Commissioner Jaworski.
I think the part that I would kind of like to think a little bit more about too is improve the ecological nature of the site, because from a perspective of if I was to be coming forward with representing somebody in an application, a development is going to impact the site no matter what. So I guess I'm just kind of curious about what the standard of improved ecological function means, because, I think anybody could argue you're going to be impacting it no matter what, even if you build to LEED gold status. And so I wonder if a better standard might not be minimal on-site impact or something. I mean, but just something that does recognize that putting an industrial development on an area that has wetlands and things like that and ecological functions will impact it. It won't improve it. Even if you did the best job you could, and of course, we hope that everybody designs with sustainable standards. But yeah, just kind of curious about that one. What was the kind of the hope of the committee behind saying that?
Can I have a little timeout? Sorry, can we stay focused on the 10? And can we, yeah, and then go, this is like an additional subtext.
Totally. And you know what, I'm leaving in 6 minutes, so how about I just put
Why don't you get an answer, if there's an answer, Zach?
Oh, no, I was going to say staff can, if you guys just want to write that one down and deal with it if you want to deal with it. And
Zach, did you have an answer? You have anything to add?
Provided the
Okay.
Commissioner Borowski.
Commissioner Randall, or Commissioner Jaworski and Commissioner Randall. Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, I just want to let you know that on removing the requirement of 10 employees per acre, I'm going to vote against that. And I'm going to vote against that because if I understand what Commissioner Nicolello said, is that code shouldn't justify job creation, it should be other ways. And to me, this is other ways, because if they're not meeting what code requires and development standards, in order to receive an adjustment, they have to have this criteria. I think that is the other ways, and I think that if they do not want to meet all the code requirements, they should be giving the city something else, and part of that is job creation. So that's why I'm going to vote against it.
Okay. Commissioner Randall and then Commissioner Nicolello.
And I guess I was just going to point out that to keep in mind that this is just for adjustment review. And so if they meet the basic standards regardless in the code, then we're fine. This is only if they're going for an adjustment review. And I personally don't have a problem removing that requirement because of the others that are already in there.
Commissioner Nicolello.
Mr. Jaworski, I think you misunderstood what I said. Land use criteria, I think we don't do it right when we try and make it a silver bullet for solving every single thing. I think that there are other things we can use and other tools we have as a city to help address those issues. That being said, land use is an important part of this, but an adjustment review at the end of the day is something that an applicant applies for when they need flexibility, whether that's flexibility with setbacks, flexibility with other things. And I think that, you know, putting in the requirement of 10 employees per acre makes the desire to get flexibility really, really stringent. And keep in mind, this isn't flexibility as in something so great that it would completely, you know, destroy the purpose of this code. I mean, so I'm fine with this, and but once again, this code should not be your catch-all for everything.
Okay, I want to make sure that we get a vote before Commissioner Nicolello leaves, so I'd like to get a straw poll vote. Those that are in favor of removing this bullet excessive requirement of 10 employees per acre, which is section D, so it's subsection 36D under the adjustment review, remove that. All those in favor? All those opposed? So that's a 5-1 vote, 5 in favor, 1 opposed. Okay, so we go to the next item, which is economic development. So these are related items to our discussion that impacted other sections of the adoption package. So it's economic development policy 3.17. And that section is the large lot preservation. Staff's recommending that we remove the prior to securing large lots. Is there any comment by staff?
That is in order to make it consistent with other changes we made to the Clear Lake Overlay Zone standards.
So this is in the comprehensive plan?
Yes, this is a comp plan policy.
Thank you.
Okay, can I get a straw poll vote? All those in favor of striking prior to securing large lots? All those in favor? Unanimous? Okay, that's a good, does everybody want to take like literally how fast can you run to the restrooms? Like a 3-minute
3-minute break.
3-minute break. Commissioner Nicolello has to leave, so it's a good time. Take a quick break. Yeah, 3 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, you can have 4 if you can't run that fast. Move on. I want to acknowledge Commissioner Borowski and Commissioner Nicolello brought up the adjustment review on the Clear Lake overlay subsection 36. Section C. If you could just have that on your to-do list, just look at the language relevant to their comments and bring it back tomorrow. Great. Okay, so I'm going to have staff start. So, because we have an idea for approach, so staff's going to explain that.
Yeah, so when we left off at our last meeting before last week, so it was April 10th, we made it through a bunch of your notebook until the parks expansion study. And it follows the same kind of logic as the other study that we've already reviewed in a lot of detail. So I would propose that since we don't have any public testimony or recommended changes other than typos to the following number of tabs, that we move past those sections and move right into the residential ordinance and allow us to use the staff we have here to help us with those deliberations.
Commissioner Borowski?
Just, so give me what tab are we looking at?
So we're starting at, and I have old tabs, so I think it's, is it J? I-J? So it's J
Actually,
findings.
just labeled residential land.
No, but where did we start? What are the sections we're actually going to skip over?
Oh.
So it's the park expansion, so it's J findings,
Appendix C,
C,
Parks Expansion Study.
all the
Okay.
way to residential.
Okay, so then I do have a question.
Okay.
Do you anticipate any of the changes that we made with the Clear Lake overzone to have changes to the findings?
I don't think they do, but I've put this caveat out there before. The findings are not adopted codes, policy. The findings are continually changing based on what we hear from the public, based on when your lawyer gets around to writing a little bit more, based on what we hear from you. So I don't think that there's anything in the current findings that would no longer be true based on anything you did. We may want to add a little bit more in here and there. But I do believe that we will make those findings more robust and do some things to them before they go to council that you haven't seen. And I view that differently from the code and the metro plan and the products that actually get adopted.
So when we're recommending this packet to council, we are not recommending the findings? Is that what you're saying?
You are recommending the findings that you've seen there, but I may want to add a bunch of stuff.
Relevant to the changes.
So like the stuff that's in the staff report where they've explained things to you, I might want to scatter some of that stuff under the proper sections of the findings as well, things like that.
Okay. And will those come to us, and will we see those before they go to council or not?
I would like to say, no, I'd like you to make a recommendation that you're fine with what's in there, and that on the findings particularly, we take some of the issues that you've brought up, especially those where you've made recommendations to them that they consider them closely. I might want to put under the finding that's related, under the OAR that's related to that, or the code section that's related to that, that the Planning Commission put a lot of thought into this one, or, things like that.
Okay. It was just a process question,
Yeah.
because we're skipping over the findings of the employment zone. We didn't go through it. You said, let's flip forward. So that was just my question.
Well, you did, yeah. I mean, you did look at a fair amount of those findings, didn't you? I mean, didn't you go through
Looked at
the
the
expansion
study.
study?
We looked at the study. We didn't go
Yeah.
through the findings.
Right, the actual typical, yeah.
Tab in here
If you
that
have
says
any
finding.
issues with those, I'd like to know about them, other than, typos and that sort of thing that you can just pass along.
That's okay.
Go ahead.
Quick comment, is it the case that we received no public comment on those pieces, and we've also received no comment from planning commissioners to date on those either?
Not
Because we didn't-
specifically.
Okay.
Because we didn't go through it yet. But that's okay.
No, actually, let's have Terry repeat it again, just because we're televised. Let's get the factual up to date.
Well, sure, thank you. I want to clarify that we are tracking all of your discussion, all of your comments, and trying to catch where they flow through the document. So a good example is that our treatment of the sand and gravel designated property did cause changes to our expansion analysis for employment uses. And we provided references to that in the index of other changes that we attached to your April 10th memo. So that will be one of the attachments to, if you get to your recommendation by tomorrow's special meeting, which I'm anticipating we're going to need to hold, then that list of changes, I've got it right over here, would be an attachment to your motion. And so this goes through every change, and you're basically giving us direction to go update the whole binder consistent with this.
Okay.
And we're not actually, to clarify what Terry's proposing, we're not actually not reviewing it. It's similar how we did the front half of the book. We didn't go word for word, page by page. So she's just suggesting, because she hasn't heard, except for typos, Scrivener errors from Planning Commission on these sections, and there were no public comments, that we skip to residential. That does not mean if somebody has something substantial right now to bring up, they can bring it up. Just means that's the suggestion based on.
Thank you.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean we're not reviewing. It just means, okay, if nobody has anything, let's skip.
Right. And in the past, we did that tab by tab.
Right.
And this one, we just jumped over about 4 tabs. So
Yeah,
that's why I was
yeah.
bringing it up.
Yep. Okay. So are there any hot items that need to be brought up? Somebody's got a tab that really needs to be addressed. Okay, Commissioner Mills, did you have anything? I just want to make sure I see a giant tab, that's why. So let me get a straw poll vote. All those in favor because there has not been any public comment. If you do have Scrivener's errors, et cetera, please check in with staff, let them know after this meeting that we skip now to the residential land section. All those in favor? It's unanimous. So, okay.
Okay, so we're going to go to review of the residential ordinance, which is behind the tab labeled residential land. And I've asked Emily to just remind you what's in this ordinance, and then we'll have time to walk through the attachments to it.
So the ordinance itself is substantially shorter than the one for jobs, parks, and schools because we put the establishment of the urban growth boundary and all of the materials that go with that in the jobs, parks, and schools ordinance. Under city ordinance in your residential section of your binder, you see the ordinance. It begins with recitals that are basically just kind of a recitation of history and what led us here. Starting with, we used to share a UGB, we have House Bill 3337 that said you need to break up, and a little bit of what we've done since then. Recital E talks about the residential land supply study that was done in 1999 and specifies that it no longer has pertinent information in it and it's no longer applicable. Then you get into the meat of the ordinance, which is always what follows the ordaining clause. The City of Eugene does ordain as follows. And in Section 1, we address the Metro Plan. In terms of residential, staff made the recommendation, is making the recommendation to you that addressing a lot of concerns that were raised by neighborhoods, that you don't adopt a completely new set of goals and policies for residential land, that we continue to apply the Metro Plan's policies and goals as in terms of residential land. And so Section 1 very clearly says that we have to replace the findings that are listed in the Metro Plan because they relate so specifically to the last planning period and have a lot of details and numbers related to a planning period that's now expired. So that's made clear both in the Section 1 text and then also the text we recommend that you include in the Metro Plan, which is right there in the body of the ordinance where it says a metropolitan residential land land use and housing element. So we refer there, we add a reference to the Eugene comp plan, Envision Eugene comp plan, and we specify in the body of the plan itself that policies continue to apply, but findings don't. Section 2, and so we'll walk through tabs that relate to these. We don't need a tab related to the Metro plan because it's succinct enough, it fits right here in the ordinance itself. Section 2 is a reference to the Envision Eugene Comprehensive Plan, and for that there are some tabs that staff will walk you through, and so we'll follow the flow of that, but largely it references a bit of an amendment to the Envision Eugene Comprehensive Plan that the council will have just adopted, hopefully, by acting on the previous ordinance. This will have an amendment that will now add some language to deal with residential. That's going to be at tab A1. The next tab, A2, is the residential land supply study, which is really the meat of this ordinance, and staff will walk you through that. But just like the employment land study, it takes you from what do we have in 2012, what do we need, and what are we going to do about it. Section 3 of the ordinance and Section 4 of the ordinance are the entirety of the code amendments that you're being asked to make a recommendation on for the residential package. These two together address that final efficiency measure. So in the category of what are we going to do about it, there have been a lot of things done. And Terry, you're probably going to want to talk more about this, although there's not a tab for it because, again, it's succinct enough it fits right here in the ordinance. So let's not forget that when we get done talking about the supply study. And that really is the entirety of the residential ordinance. So probably walking through tabs now would be the right next step.
Yeah.
Okay.
Walking through the study would be the next logical thing.
I do also, I think probably I want to mention that we went back and forth about the county's role in adopting the residential ordinance. I didn't think legally there was a necessity for the county to take any action on these things because there's no UGB expansion and the actions that I just described aren't clearly triggering a county action. That said, we are revising some text in the Metro Plan, just that bit that's listed on page 2. And county staff, I don't know if it was related to hearing from the board itself, the Planning Commission, or staff's own analysis, but felt that it was important that the county take action on this ordinance as well. It's sufficiently unclear that we decided we didn't want to take that on as an issue. So this ordinance, there's a county version of this ordinance that's also included in your packet that has the county also taking action on the Metro Plan provision, and to the extent that the Envision Eugene Comp Plan applies outside the city limits to the urbanizable area, it has the county adopting for those lands.
So let's look at the first tab. So the first tab is city ordinance. Are there any questions, discussion items for the city ordinance section? Commissioner Borowski?
I'm just not clear about what you said about the county and how the county could weigh in on residential lands. Is there a way that they're going to be able to derail this at a county level, the residential side?
I think it's one of those cross that bridge when we come to it. I mean, it would be a bad result for us to get to the end of the process and have a court or have there even just be a big public outcry that the county should have acted. Addressing that concern, if it's a concern shared by Eugene at that point, would require going back. There are changes to the Metro Plan that arguably you could say would apply to both jurisdictions. Honestly, this was more of a policy call, so I might want to have your planning director address it. But it's not that clear that the county has to act. That is the case with so many things that Eugene and the county do together. And I think probably more in the spirit of good partnership, we're asking the county to go through this process with us. They believe that they should and need to, and telling them they don't was something that we decided not to do.
So that you're asking them to just do section A or
So
enact
their
the whole-
ordinance is in, you should have a tab called county ordinance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't see that in mine.
It was,
It was part of the
Sarah, was it part of their
updated
packet
package.
update?
Oh, it's in today's,
No, it was the one. in this-
last week's?
No,
No, it's in the
February.
tabs that you're looking at, right? If you just go.
No,
to
he didn't get, there was an update. After we initially got the binder, there was some updates with additional tabs.
So I can easily tell you, it's a pretty small ordinance, so I can tell you, what we're having the county do is what you see in tab A1.
Okay.
And A2, but specifically only to the extent these provisions are applicable within the Eugene urbanizable area. So areas that are outside the city limits, but that are inside the urban growth boundary, are technically in the county's jurisdiction. They contract with the city to administer a lot of land use in that area, but to the extent that any provisions in our new Envision Eugene comprehensive plan,
Right.
in these tabs, these bits, I mean, it's not much, you'll see, could relate to land outside the city limits and inside the urban growth boundary. They're acting for that reason.
Okay, so then my question would be, is if they have issues with, let's say, the housing mix in those areas, could they say, we think the housing mix is going to be 60-40?
I think so, yeah.
So it is, so they could challenge the findings that they see in this, or the assumptions that has been given to staff by city council as far as the way that this whole residential land supply was.
Yes. Yep. So, and then the other provision is the metro plan change, which is what you see in your ordinance in the body.
Right.
So those are the two things. They obviously, they're not adopting our R2 code changes because that clearly only applies to urbanized land under the city's jurisdiction.
Okay, let's go back to our initial straw poll vote, city ordinance. All those in favor, I didn't have any questions or comments from the city ordinance. All those in favor of recommending approval of the city ordinance as drafted? All those in favor?
I'm not clear what we're voting on. I'm sorry.
It's the city ordinance section. It's a tab that sits right after
Sure.
residential
I'm
land.
sure I knew what I was voting on,
Yeah.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, no worries.
And is the
And to be,
text changed to the metro plan, section A, and then,
The
It's the
efficiency matter.
whole,
whole
it's the
ordinance.
whole ordinance, yeah, yeah.
And 2750 and 2751.
and you mean, I think, just as to form word verbiage,
Yeah.
because the tabs we haven't talked about yet that are incorporated in the ordinance.
Yeah.
right, I guess I'm a little hesitant to vote on it yet.
yeah, we could leave it for last.
Okay, we'll leave it for last.
Okay.
So let's,
I might have been the only one that was hesitating here, so I don't mind.
I think it makes sense. Let's hold off until you're,
we'll hold off on the city and county till the end, the ordinances till the end. So the next tab in line after the ordinances is tab A1, the EECP maps. So the Envision Eugene Comprehensive Plan amendments.
Yes, so this is not a map, it's some language to be added to the urban growth boundary chapter of the comprehensive plan, and it's just because of the sequence that we're asking the ordinances to be approved. So the first ordinance approves the UGB expansion and sets a comprehensive plan. The second ordinance deals with residential, and so we need to go back and amend what we just adopted to keep them severable. So this is the necessary language to update this chapter to apply to also the residential.
Any
So
discussion?
this keeps it, the two separate. This is the,
So any questions, discussion items? Then let's go to straw poll vote on Exhibit A1, Envision Eugene Comprehensive Plan Amendments to recommend, how did we state it before? Because I want to make sure we're consistent, that we have,
Just that you recommend no
that we
change to
recommend no
this.
changes. Thank
Yeah,
you.
and then we incorporate this in the council, in your recommendation to the council.
All those in favor?
I just had a question, but that's okay.
No, wait,
At least abstain.
okay, I'm not actually, all those in favor? Okay, all those opposed? All those that abstain? Okay, so that's 3 in favor, 2 abstain. Commissioner Borowski, did you have a comment?
Well, I guess the question would have been if this was done intentionally, this portion could have been in the comprehensive plan from the beginning, but it was put in here to happen after the UGB expansion was done, so that the residential portion wouldn't have been all one ordinance, correct?
That's right. If this, what this language primarily does is it attaches to the Envision Eugene Comprehensive Plan the study that you're going to talk about next. And if the elected officials say put it all together in one ordinance, we would merge that language in tab A1 for residential into the text, probably a tab A1 or whatever over here. It just says, okay, this would have to happen second, the way that it's set up. This would be an amendment to the thing you just adopted. And it does allow for that possibility that either the county says they want to do something different, or the council wants to take more time with this, or whatever it is, or we screwed this up and one gets sent back to us. It allows, the other to move forward. And so jobs, parks, and schools, for example, could be set, and this one could be.
Okay, so that's why I gave pause to this, because for me, there was public testimony about, this is the separating the two ordinances, basically.
This is a good time to talk about it.
And so there was public testimony about that do we want to separate it or not? And by affirming this, it's a policy judgment that we're taking and forwarding on to the city council. And so that's why I abstained, because I don't think that was made clear to the commission that that's what we're doing, and that we're taking that public testimony and saying we feel that it should be two ordinances. And I don't think that was fleshed out well enough, and that's why I abstained. And I don't know if that was going to be addressed later on or not, but there was substantial testimony raised both in the public hearing and in the written comments that I believe that if...
It was an issue, just to be clear, because I don't want you to think that staff is trying to pull...
No,
okay.
I didn't.
It was an issue that staff addressed in a memo to you.
We dealt with it on April 10th.
Yeah.
And I don't know if anyone, that was when we would have thought of discussion would have come up. If discussion's necessary on this is a fine time to have it. Because yes, in recommending moving forward this way, inherent in that is that you're not recommending that these be combined into one ordinance.
So were there any other commissioners that were not clear about this when they voted? Okay, so it sounds like, so I think we can move
Yep.
forward with the 3.
So I
2
just peeked
abstain.
at Heather's notes from the meeting on April 10th, and the commission voted in a straw poll to keep the ordinances together.
Okay.
Commissioner Mills, did you want to explain why you abstained, just for context?
Yeah,
or-
I'm not, I guess, yes, very briefly, I'm not inherently opposed to keeping them separate, but I have grave qualms about some of the sweeping conclusions and summary statements that are made here that I can't support.
Okay, so the next tab is A2, and it's the residential land supply study. And why don't we go back to, are there any, let's use this document again to make sure you had amendments. It's where it's comprehensive. On April 4th, 2017, They had a comprehensive list of changes, just to note anything special, relevant testimony, and that's what we had done at the beginning of the tabs, so we can avoid taking a vote without making
Right.
sure everybody understands.
Catch up here.
And it wasn't that we went through every item, you just kind of gave a brief summary
Yeah.
in this section.
So I'm looking at the PC agenda from April 10th. The memo that staff attached to that summarized all the public testimony that we got
Yep.
into separate categories. And one of the categories was the residential land supply study. You
It's
got
an
that, Heather?
attachment F.
So I'm going to let Heather take it from here.
Yeah, so I'm not going to walk through the residential land supply study, but the first question that came up in the April, or that we have in the April 10th memo, is about the buildable lands analysis and the resulting multifamily housing deficit. And just, let's see. There were some questions about, the residential land supply study's 5 parts.
Page.
It's on page, yep, sorry.
You turn to the very,
Page
very
15.
last page of that whole packet.
That's
Oh,
not
I'm
where I'm
sorry.
at. It's page 15.
Yep, nope. So on the April 10th memo, the April 10th packet, it was attachment F. And I am on page 15 of that packet.
Bottom, where it
Yeah.
says residential lands.
Yep. Sorry, guys, I know this has to do with the fact that we're picking up
We have several
from
packets,
April
so-
10th, yeah.
Yeah, if anybody's ever confused, just stop and then we'll make
Yep,
sure we're all on the same page.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That is today's packet, I think.
That says April.
Oh,
this is the
you
10th,
have
and
it.
this is-
Oh, okay.
Page 51 is F. You're going forward to, okay. Page 15, okay.
All right, so we're on the same page? Okay,
PC agenda page 51.
correct.
15.
15. It looks like this,
From the April 10th meeting.
from the April 10th packet.
I just got confused on this.
Okay.
Page
I got it.
51, and I was looking at attachment F to see if there was
Oh,
a
I
page
don't know where
15 of
51
attachment
came
F.
from.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, sorry about that. So residential land supply study, it's 5 parts, and what we tried to do in the April 10th memo under residential land supply study was go through the testimony that has been raised in the same sequence that it would generally come up in this residential land supply study. And so, and mostly this, at least the number 1 here, buildable lands analysis and resulting multifamily housing deficit, starts out with, what did we use for the Metro Plan diagram, and then goes into the 2012 buildable lands inventory, and then, into some of the other parts of the residential land study. So that's why it's in the order that it's in. And the testimony's ultimate conclusion was, based on these different things, and essentially the residential land supply studies, the assumptions we made in there, they do not believe that we have a deficit for multifamily housing. And so what we did was walk through each of these points. So, again, on PC agenda, page 15 from April 10th, the Metro Plan diagram status, one of the questions was about, and do we want me to, no, don't walk through these?
Yeah. We should
Just
already,
if there's any questions. Okay. So the first one was about the Metro Plan diagram status. Did you guys have any questions about the way we responded to that?
I think what I would suggest is just look over if you have any comments, questions in this section. Which basically goes from page 15.
All the way to 11?
to page 20.
Or sorry, 19, yeah.
Is it 19? Yeah. Well, it keeps going, right?
Yeah, it does keep going, but that
To
one
22,
major section
23.
is-
So just if you have any comments that you've made, any questions? I guess I can put myself in the queue, I thought there was a lot of very thoughtful testimony. I would like to see and encourage, personally, I think a lot of the discussion in some of the items that were brought up by various people testifying aren't necessarily, from my perspective, relevant to the adoption package. I do think they're really critical and important, and through monitoring next steps in terms of affordability, the missing middle housing, clear and objective standards for needed housing. I mean, there's a whole slew of things that I actually don't think that we should wait to necessarily address. I think that these are things, I know they've been on an agenda item, so that's something I would encourage City Council to prioritize. So I just wanted,
Add that to your memo of highlights
yeah.
for the council.
I mean,
So
that's
do-
me, but
yeah.
I'd like to hear other discussion. That's just kind of my global, I had some individual comments, but that's more my global response. Commissioner Randall and then Commissioner Mills.
I would echo those sentiments, and I think, there's been a lot of talk about the BLI being from 2012 and all of those things, and I
Yeah.
think, the challenge is going back and redoing that is just not smart, because it'll just push the can farther down the road. So I think we need to go ahead and, go ahead with what we have. However, I think I agree with Commissioner Taylor that for me, the key elements in all of this are the monitoring program and urban reserves. We've got to get on those right away. And I think if we don't, then we're going to, I think, be in a real world of hurt on any kind of housing affordability. I agree with the missing middle and some of those things that we need to get on right away. But I think we need to get this going first. And so I was just going to echo those sentiments.
Commissioner Mills.
I also would support moving ahead immediately. My comments are largely global in nature also, and I'll keep them brief, but the crux of my concern is affordability. And there's a fair amount of language in here talking about it, but I don't think it's addressed. Just to quote on PC Agenda, page 19, under Section 2, Housing Affordability, third paragraph. Housing affordability also identifies other strategies that the city can pursue. I use the word can and not will, as part of implementing Envision Eugene, such as raising the average wage, reducing housing costs through promoting compact development, and expanding housing variety and choice, and preserving and maintaining existing housing stock. These are all good measures, and I'm not suggesting they're not, but to plan your future around those as being your affordability measures, as raise the wage. I feel like if I were making a plan for myself and my budget and my future for my household, this is not how you would go about it. You would provide some contingency in this to try to adjust the future and make sure that you ensured that you could afford what you were doing. And instead, I feel like we've taken monitoring and we've used it as an excuse to kick the can down the road. And so my advice is to, okay, if we're going to kick the can down the road, let's kick it as short a distance as possible, pick it up and get to work. Because I do not feel that we're really addressing affordability in this plan. And that's how come I'm having qualms about, supporting it. And that's not to say I believe the correct step is to go back to the drawing board. So I've got a conflict of conscience here of what I'm going to say and what I'm going to do. but I don't feel that the plan as it sits ensures affordability or an attack on affordability.
Commissioner Borowski.
Well, a couple of things. One is I have to apologize because this going back and forth to 3 or 4 different AISs, I wasn't prepared as I should have been on this. I was kind of going more through this bundle, and I should have gone back to that, and I apologize because I didn't realize that this portion of it was going to refer to that. So I may have issues with this, and I will go back and look at it when I have more time. And if there's an opportunity for me to weigh in, that's fine. If not, I've missed my chance. I understand that. But I think right now we're kind of talking a little more globally or whatever, citywide. I've heard things from other commissioners as to what they felt they would like to see going forward. For me, one of the things that I heard and that really struck a chord with me, because they were coming from both sides of the political issue, you know, it came from Thousand Friends, it came from the home builders, was the need to address this parcel-specific metro plan and have that put into place. And the second thing I heard, and I've heard over and over again, is the needed housing piece. That the needed housing part of our code needs to be adjusted and addressed so that it can work. Because right now, from what I hear from developers, from what I hear from lawyers, from what I hear from people who are trying to get housing built in this community, that they're having to use a tool that they would rather not use, but it's the only tool that they can use to get a house built on a lot of places. And so I think those are the areas that I've heard. And if I hear it from both sides, it kind of makes me feel like that's something that it's not just a partisan thing saying it's the home builders, I want more lots to build on. It's we need to look at this, and if we're going to implement these policies, these are some of the tools that I think need to be addressed. So.
Yeah, I was going to say that's my kind of strong connection. If we're going to approve this and move forward with the assumptions that we've made based on the data we're using, that we're going to meet it within the current UGB, then I think we need to make sure that housing is there. We have to really look at all the tools, the codes, et cetera, and make sure we can actually do it without a lot of imposition and roadblocks. So that's what we heard from all sides. So that's why I don't think it is something, like Commissioner Mills said, that we can actually delay. I think it's actually coupled with the approval, meaning we jump on it immediately after to make sure that we have that capacity, truly, capacity in terms of flexibility and making sure that we can meet those goals. Robin.
Yeah, thank you. I just thank you for the comments. I'd just like to point out that Council has actually already given staff direction to proceed with the review of the needed housing standards, the clear and objective standards for needed housing. And the timing they directed us to do that with is upon state acknowledgement of our urban growth boundary. So that direction's already been given, and that's what we would certainly plan to do. I know with the parcel-specific land use diagram, which Commissioner Borowski brought up, that is something that is on our work plan for what we're calling Phase 2 of UGB, or not UGB, but Comprehensive Plan amendments. And the reason it's in Phase 2 is because we are working very hard to get the first most important piece adopted, which is the UGB and any necessary components, policy components to make sure, and technical components to make sure that that happens. So we've been very focused on that. And it's the same group of people that needs to do any of this work. So we've got a one at a time kind of a situation here. So I appreciate that. It's very well received.
Any other comments or questions? Commissioner Jaworski.
Yeah, some of the commissioners have brought up, the need to get onto monitoring and urban reserves. And on the PC agenda, page 25, it talks about action to address results of monitoring. And when I read that, and it also talks about urban reserves, when I read that, I get a little confused on, let's say it's 2017 now, when is this adopted? Do you begin work after the council adopts it, or it's approved by the state? If that's the point, and then the first monitoring report is 3 years from that date, so you're looking at 2020 or later that when you're going to take a look at what's happening and begin to look about the need for urban reserves and how much, and it says you're going to base it on the population forecast in place at that time. Does that mean the 2012 might still be in place at that time?
No. The Portland State Population Forecast Program is now on a 3-year cycle.
So it's on a
And
3-year
so
cycle.
we'll have another one in 2018. There's
Okay.
already a 2015 forecast that's been finalized.
So even with that new data, whenever it is, we're not really going to be looking at urban reserves and those kind of things until 3 or more years from now? Is that the way that reads?
Right, so I'm referring to
Okay.
the council's memo from 2015. They gave us specific direction, as Robin mentioned, to update the needed housing regulations within 1 year of state acknowledgement of the UGB. And then for urban reserves, it's within 2 years of state acknowledgement of the baseline UGB.
Commissioner,
I know also Heather responded to the monitoring interval in her materials. I didn't know if there's anything else you wanted to add to that. In terms of catching up our data, we really need a baseline to start from. We need a date of adoption of the urban growth boundary before we can begin monitoring, which is kind of the catch-22 that we're in.
And same with urban reserves. We have to have a UGB adopted before we can do urban reserves, so.
And also, I think just to be clear, it's not the city that adopts urban reserves, it's the county. The county adopts urban reserves. The city can do all the work and, provide staffing, but it's definitely a partnership issue. And in the end, the city may also take action. I don't recall, but primarily it's a county action. So just to clarify that, it's important for Eugene's growth, and it's important for the rural areas around Eugene because it also gives them some certainty that they won't be brought in. But, until you have the baseline urban growth boundary established, urban reserves is a certain number of years beyond the year that your UGB is established for.
Commissioner, there was someone from the public that wanted to repeat something. Did you hear?
I didn't hear Beth's comment.
Okay, or Heather's comment?
Oh, what did I say?
So she said that you can't start UGB
Oh, we
or
need a
urban
UGB.
reserves until a UGB is adopted.
We need
Just-
our UGB to be able to do the urban reserve planning. You have to have the UGB set, yeah.
To put a finer point on that, just to clarify, we need to have an adopted and acknowledged urban growth boundary for Eugene before Eugene will be allowed to adopt urban reserves.
Or the county could adopt. Right.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you for
Before
the
the-
clarification, Robin. Commissioner Borowski.
So I guess one of my questions is, we're putting timelines down on a state acknowledgement of our UGB. We're putting timelines on urban reserve. We're putting timelines on working on the other processes that have been going forward on our work plan. If this goes up to the state and it is appealed, does that mean that it's not acknowledged?
Yes.
So, as Commissioner Jaworski's talking about, best case scenario would be our first monitoring look would be in 2017. But if it's appealed and remanded and then sent back and appealed again, we could be talking 5-6 years. Is that not correct?
So to be clear, I think the monitoring one probably requires a little bit more explanation. What you're looking at on page 25 of the PC agenda was an AIS to the council that the council voted upon and approved. And it's a follow-up to a lot of these items. So the monitoring program, the policies you are being asked to make a recommendation on to the council governs when monitoring reports happen. This provision in the council directive refers to expanding the UGB to the extent indicated by the monitoring report. So it's the action, assuming when we get all the information on housing, and most people are feeling like it will probably require some expansion. This relates to that second step, what you do with the monitoring. So the final bullet under action to address monitoring is target for city and county consideration of a proposal to expand the UGB to the extent indicated by monitoring within 3 years of state acknowledgement. So this is like, I mean, it's sort of, this is very fast. So needed housing immediately after, update, consideration of updates within a year of acknowledgement. So that's in front of you guys within a year of acknowledgement. Urban reserves within 2 years in front of you, city and county consideration. So all the staff work done and have it in front of you within 2 years of acknowledgement. And then 3 years, we'd be asking you to consider an expansion. So I just want to make sure that you understand how this was intended to work.
Okay. So, and thank you for that clarification. And kind of one of my, getting back to what Commissioner Taylor said and what some of the other people said here about us putting forward phantom buildable lands. The idea that we can work on the needed housing component, updating the needed housing part of the code, isn't contingent on the UGB whatsoever. That's contingent on staff time.
Right.
And I think what needs to be, what I would hope would be brought to council at some point, it doesn't have to be in this, is that hopefully that doesn't have to be tied to whether this is appealed or not. Because I think this is a problem that needs to be taken care of no matter what. And if that means, I mean, I hear at council all the time that housing is a big part of what they're trying to adjust. And if we can get housing by adjusting the code and the clear and objective standards in needed housing, that doesn't have to wait for the appeal of the UGB to happen. And I think that council needs to be made aware of that. And if they want that to happen, dedicate funding or whatever they need to do so that that can happen, and let them know that that is not tied to an appealable UGB expansion. Because right now, you're saying, and I understand why that was put forward to the council, is like, we only have so much resources. We've got to land this UGB. So we promise when we land the UGB, this is what we're going to do first, this is what we're going to do second. But I think that part, from what I heard at public testimony and from what I've heard at council, doesn't have to be tied to the expansion of the UGB or the appeals, and possibly being 2 or 3 years from now. I think that can move forward ahead. And if council knows that, they can appropriately adjust the budget and possibly get more resources put to that.
Commissioner Mills.
Yeah, I just, to confirm, to somewhat belabor Commissioner Borofsky's point, as I read the document, the Eugene City Council action, my assumption in reading update needed housing regulations is the state, within 1 year, that's a staff capacity driven, that's my assumption when I read that, because as Commissioner Borofsky's pointed out, I'm not sure I see either the connection beyond that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, probably. If you look at the table today and you look at the amount of work that's sitting in front of you on the table, and you consider the potential for arguments and additional analysis, and really we don't know what all we would be engaged in if there were to be appeals or other twists and turns as we move forward on this adoption process.
And one other point of clarification, while we talk about the needed housing regulations, primarily what we've heard, and we've heard mostly about this from the Home Builders Association specifically, that it's those criteria that we reference as clear and objective criteria for needed housing. They would like that list of criteria to be revisited and made more clear and more objective. And so just to let you know more specifically what we're talking about is the primary piece of that package that'll come to you. And there has been preliminary work done. Home Builders has been really assertive in making their intentions clear. Their attorney has sent what they would like to see done. But obviously the flip side of that is a legislative process that involves neighborhood involvement, and you've been through a few of those, so you know what they'll be like.
So before we conclude this section, in our big binder, which once again, we're looking at the tab, the residential land supply study, what we've been looking at in the April 10th AIS, or actual public testimony around this index that's in our binder. So I just want to make sure before we get a straw poll vote. Okay, I'm going to add myself in the queue. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I want to, before we vote, and this is something I feel really strongly about, is that I really appreciate the state of Oregon and the purpose for UGBs. And I think us moving forward is, I think it's important. I think we do need the baseline in order to move us forward. And I also know that because of exactly what Emily brought up, the legislative process, I think we cannot forget that if we adopt this, that when those opportunities come, when we've done the work on clear and objective standards, whether it's for needed housing or not, but looking at missing middle, what we're doing with residential in terms of Chapter 9, that there's going to be opposition from neighbors. And we have to remember that we have adopted a UGB, and there are widespread concerns of not having options and flexibility for residences. Because what I don't want to see happen is that we make this decision and that is forgotten, and that at a political level we're stopping infill, we're stopping looking at diverse housing types. And there's, granted, we have to hear from all voices. I just think it's important that City Council recognizes the choice they're making. Yeah. So let's straw poll vote on this index, or sorry, this tab. So all those in favor, there are no changes, and we recommend to Council what's been proposed. All those in favor? All those opposed? All those that abstain. So we have 3 in favor, 1 opposed, and 1 abstain.
Thank you. Could I summarize what I think I heard for putting into your memo to council as far as the commission's concerns and issues that you want them to look at proactively? I heard that you would like to add to this memo that you haven't seen yet, but you will soon, a section on the residential study and ordinance where you would like to highlight and have the council and the city, really, the city address issues around housing proactively, including affordability, clear and objective standards, the parcel diagram, monitoring, and missing middle housing. And if there's anything else, we'll add it in there. The format that will take is kind of just a paragraph of what you discussed and things that you believe the council should be noting in their deliberations and things that you all discussed a lot. Yeah.
And just for a process thing, we're trying to wrap up this so that it coincides with the county planning commission's thing. We can work on crafting that memo to our city council after that. So once we get it, that doesn't mean that that memo is final, and maybe that would be something that we could put on a future planning commission agenda to make sure that all of our concerns that we want addressed to the city council, not changes, but things like that, like we were just talking, Brown, at this table, are reflected in that memo. So we don't have to sign off on that memo by 5 o'clock tomorrow. I think we have,
I think that's right.
I think we, and I would hope that we would put that on an agenda of an upcoming planning commission meeting before the city council does their public hearing, and
Yeah.
its recommendation goes to them.
On that note, the council has set their agenda for their first work session on the urban growth boundary, and it's for May 24th. So we do have a number of meetings where we could get you your review of that memo.
I would appreciate that.
Okay, great. So we have one final tab, and do I dare at 2 minutes? Let's see if I dare. It's the, and we have the ordinance as well, but we have the findings for the residential land.
Anything come up in the draft findings?
Was my question. I'll have to get back.
So did anybody else have any comments or questions on the draft findings?
Can you do a
Yeah, let's do a straw poll
on
vote.
those?
All those in favor, there are no changes, and we recommend moving this section forward to City Council. All those in favor? 3 in favor, all those opposed, 1 opposed, all those that abstain, 1 abstention. Do we want to go to the city ordinance?
Please.
Okay. Just gonna, can everybody stay like 2 minutes more? I mean, unless it becomes a big discussion. City ordinance, tab.
I would note one thing for you in consideration of the ordinance, just because we didn't really explain it. The residential code amendment to the R2 zone is contained within the ordinance. And we got, I believe, one piece of testimony on this, property owner requesting not to be rezoned. So we clarified for that property owner that this is not a rezoning proposal. This is a code standard change that would raise the minimum density in the R2 zone from 10 units per acre to 13 units per acre. And that's what's contained in this ordinance section that would take care of the remaining need for medium density housing.
Okay. So any comments, questions? Commissioner Randall?
And just to add to what Terry said, it also, I just want to point out that it does exempt lots that are zoned R2 that are less than half an acre when this takes effect. So some of those smaller infill lots wouldn't be subject to this new density requirement.
And council voted on this, correct? Gave you direction?
They gave us direction to pursue this amendment, yes.
So all those in favor of no changes, and we recommend moving this forward to City Council. All those in favor? That's 4. All those opposed? 1. It's 4-1. Do you want to vote on the county?
I don't think that's needed.
Okay. So one last item. Are we going to do a special meeting tomorrow?
Yes, so what I would propose we do with all of your votes is go back to our desks and incorporate those into the materials, and we would send out notice of the meeting this afternoon by 5 o'clock. The meeting will occur tomorrow at 5 p.m. here in the Sloat Room. And ahead of that, your materials would be a draft motion for your consideration. A clean copy of your changes to the Clear Lake overlay would be attached to that. And then also the index of other changes. Those would be the materials you should expect by tomorrow morning for your review. And thank you for spending the extended time.
Can you all make it
What
tomorrow?
time is it again?
It's 5 o'clock.
Yeah,
And I'll
we
be
did
here
a
at the
poll
beginning.
for it.
I can be here at the beginning.
Okay.
I won't be able to stay completely till 7 if we
Yeah.
go that way. But
I'm gonna have to
doesn't
leave
sound
early.
like
It
will.
shouldn't take too long, provided we capture everything in the materials we send out to you.
Okay, great. So we'll look for that at 5 o'clock.
Okay.
Okay. So thank you, everybody, for working through this gigantic document and doing all the volunteer work that you do, because this was quite a lot. And thank you, staff. Okay. Thank you. We'll see you tomorrow.